Terrific. Let's call the meeting to order. This is the March 14th, 2019 Town of Sherborn Select Board meeting. We've got a very full agenda tonight, including the 29 articles in the town meeting warrant. So let's get going. David, would you read the agenda with any proposed changes? David is not here. Diane, would you? Thank you.
Good evening. So we're going to call to order, and then we will amend or approve the agenda. We'll then have public comment, and then a consideration of our consent agenda, and under that is the payroll warrant, 2 one-day pouring licenses. Our next meeting dates is March 16th, it's at our advisory hearing, and then March 28th and April 11th. And then there is the appointment of the registrar for Edward P. McGuire for a term to expire April 1st, 2022, requested by the town clerk. We'll then have Chief Aaron Kenny here to talk about the hazard mitigation plan and a consideration of adoption and approval of the plan. He then is going to present you a request for a reserve fund transfer. And then number 3 is the consideration of soil and groundwater testing at Jameson Field by Sean Killeen, John Higley, and Darrell Beardsley will be here to answer any questions. Then there will be a consideration of a revocable license agreement between the town and Sherborn Yacht Club. We'll then ratify the employment agreement of police lieutenant. Then we'll discuss the 2019 April 23rd meeting for annual town meeting. We'll discuss the omnibus budget and capital items and warrant articles. We'll discuss the hearings with advisory on Saturday the 16th. Select board budgets prior to advisory hearings. The annual town meeting warrant. We'll open it and close it for amendments and additions, and then we'll vote and sign the final 2019 annual town meeting warrant. Under routine business is the finance director report, town administrator's report, selectmen's report. We'll adjourn and maybe possibly go into executive session. Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A, Subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to threatened potential litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the town, and the chair so declares for the library. That's it.
Terrific. Do I have a motion to either amend or approve the agenda?
So move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Terrific. There is no public comment sign-up, so let's move on to the consent agenda. I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda items. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Terrific. Pass the payroll warrant around for approval, as well as the liquor licenses. Okay, Chief Kenny is going to present the hazard mitigation plan. Thought I saw him earlier. There he is. We just did.
They did. It was under the
It's one of the consent agenda items, so all 4 items have been approved.
Okay.
Yep. And we'll do the paperwork for you as well on that. Terrific.
Where is David?
Is it working? All right. Everybody hear me?
No.
All right. No? So,
There might be a button on that.
No, there's no button, just the mic, please close.
okay, is that better?
Yeah.
All right. Close. So we have, over the past several months, actually probably more like 2 years, been working on the hazard mitigation plan for the town with MAPC. The project was a grant-funded project, which was procured not long before I got here, but right before I got here. But I was able to be a part of the process, worked hand in hand with the police chief and with Director Killeen as well, just going over the potential hazards, potential risks that our town faces. It's a very comprehensive plan. I think one of the positives for us, if, you know, should you all choose to implement the plan, is it does give us the ability to apply for hazard mitigation grants, which can help with things like, some of the culvert maintenance and things like that, and issues we may have with drainage or things of that nature. It allows us to apply for those grants, and because we have an identifiable and implemented plan with FEMA. So I think MAPC and the task force or group that was together to help, do the assessment, put this together, did a very thorough job, going over the areas of, flood hazards and different things, different weather-related issues that we may have encountered, dating back a number of years. A lot of historical data, and data was analyzed to put this plan together.
That's it?
That's it. If you have any questions about it,
I had a couple quick questions. Most of the data, except for the 2018 Nor'easter, was, the most recent data was 2016. Is that fine for the plan? Do we
Yeah.
need more current data?
Yes, so they use historical data, I think dating back, I want to say it's like 20-plus years, and it goes by actually declared emergencies and, significant impact storms that were declared emergencies. So the data was, they used the FEMA guidelines and MEMA guidelines in working through this. They kind of have a very thorough and identified process. So all the historical data, it was very similar. We were able to look at other plans that other communities similar to ours had implemented, and ours is very, very thorough and meets all of those, those required, required data points and markers.
Sure. The only other item I noticed was, actually, some of them went back, some of the hazards went back to the 18th century, which was pretty interesting. There were a couple of references on pages 8, 9, and 81 to the Board of Selectmen that should be updated to Select Board.
Yes.
And that was really interesting reading. Paul and I both noticed the same thing, which was the data on the projected number of units in town was like 1,550 units, and I've always heard 1441, 1452, so I know that that's a projection, but that was a different data point than I'd seen. But
Yeah.
any other questions up here about the?
Yeah, just
Plan?
one comment on it. I apologize if I missed it, but I know it follows a certain recipe, because I've seen these before, you know what I mean? There's a certain kind of boilerplate that it goes through and a certain outline. The one thing that's a little different with Sherborn that other communities wouldn't fill in is our reliance on electricity for our individual water wells. And we've had probably the most impactful I've seen in a lifetime living here is when we get these long, prolonged power outages and I'm, taking a shower at the gym for 2 weeks.
Right.
And I would like to see, if possible, somehow that put in here in some fashion, either under snow, because snow talks about the vulnerability assessment, it talks about de-icing and so on, but there's not much language in here about power outages and how it can essentially,
So we did actually bring that up, and we brought it up and actually discussed it. And one of the areas of the plan, or one of the things that when we brought it up that was identified to us, is that the plan is meant to heavily address critical infrastructure and more or less not just town assets, but primarily town assets and critical infrastructure that's in town. So while we're very much aware of that, and we did bring it up in a couple of the meetings, it wasn't something that was necessarily, from a FEMA standpoint or MEMA standpoint, there's really nothing that we could apply for grant-wise that would take care of that or address that. That is a risk for us and a risk for our citizens. It's something that we, have to make a point to recognize and address. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Director Kleen was at one of the meetings when we brought it up. Obviously, when we get heavy snow and ice, we have the trees and the power lines down, and the potential for long outages and the reliance on well systems. And, we did talk about it at length during one of the meetings, And, you know, it wasn't something that was, I mean, I would have liked to seen it documented as well, but it wasn't something that, you know, from the standpoint of hazard mitigation plan, that was considered or shed as an individual, you know, risk or a risk that wasn't included in the plan, because they're really, for us as a town, besides recognizing at-risk families or at-risk occupancies
Yeah.
with people who may have special needs, there really isn't much we could do other than, you know, make sure we're on top of our notification process, communication with our utility partners. And, you know, we've definitely refined that and made that process much more streamlined, and we'll continue to work at that. And, you know, one of the things that we do from the emergency management perspective is we maintain a small cache of generators. So if it is one of those extremely lengthy outages and we've got a significant risk family or something, we do what we can to make sure we can provide, you know, some level of care and service for them.
So I have some,
Please.
first I wanted to compliment you on getting this done. It's important for the town to have this, and I can see a lot of work went into it. So thank you for doing it. And thank you for everybody who participated in getting this done. Secondly, I had two personal observations. The first is that as part of the process, you identified local stakeholders and have a list of people who you notified about this plan. And I wanted to ask for the future that I get included on that list of stakeholders, because I have responsibility for the Charles River, about a half a mile of it, that I own the property under the Charles River. And because I was not a stakeholder here, the statement that there's a 1% annual chance of flooding along the southeastern border on page 21, I can tell you there's a 100% chance of flooding twice a year, constantly dealing, in a good heavy rainstorm, I could have 20 acres underwater. But more importantly, at the edge of my ranch is the Henry Darth Bridge. And actually, myself and my crews spend a fair amount of time trying to protect that bridge from floating trees, from debris, and the rest. There's very little discussion in here about that bridge. There's a lot of focus on the Farm Road Bridge into Dover, and I understand how important Dover is as a sister community, and maybe more important than Medfield is, but the Henry Darth Bridge has issues, and for someone who has boated underneath the bridge and looked at the bridge, I'm not sure when was the last time anybody really took a hard look at that bridge. It would be vulnerable in the event of major flooding. I don't see it really covered in here. So there is a reference to a bridge, which I assume is the Darth Bridge, but it's really hard to identify. But I don't think the full extent of exposure there is documented, at least to the extent that I know it and have to deal with it at least twice a year. So those are not things that I would say should be changed in this plan. I think we should approve this plan and get it on record. But it's a plan that we have to update from time to time. So again, I would request that I be listed as a stakeholder, and I can provide information. I mean, we don't report the flooding. We don't do much about it.
Yeah, and I know a lot of the data is, pulled from here is very, there's not a lot of qualitative type data where there's information that has been provided, say by someone who's a landowner and said, okay, I have flooding at this occurrence. A lot of it is based off of, the flow gauge data, the different ways they monitor the river and the heights or crests of when it is flooded and things of that nature. So, I think some of that information, we like one of the things we noted even in a couple of the meetings kind of gets to your point that we have areas that flood that aren't even relevant to the river, or we have areas that, may be submerged, but it doesn't, in the estimation or in the work that MAPC was helping us with, it didn't create a hazard of a catastrophic loss or potential for catastrophic loss. It was just like, okay, the river's going to rise and it's going to do its thing, but it's, it poses a potential threat or a limited threat, but not a huge threat. And I do agree with you. If that bridge is vulnerable and you've got full trees flowing down the river, hitting it at 20 miles an hour, that can't be good. So I definitely think that is something that and if I'm not mistaken, I believe the plan would be revisited periodically. To be maintained, to be updated. Obviously, if there's any, larger impactful type of incident or storm that, would have us reclassify or relook at different zones, that's something that would definitely have to take place and that we would do. So I think the onus becomes on us now to review it and to add in those areas of concern. So duly noted, we'll definitely make sure that, your property and you as an individual that has, as a stakeholder can be added, as someone that we communicate with and is a part of, helping us update this and go through the process of updating it and keeping it current.
Thank you.
Sure, any other questions up here? Questions from the audience? Okay, I would move to approve the Sherborn Hazardous Mitigation Plan as presented tonight. Is there a second?
Second?
Second.
All in favor? And Aaron, I'd love to see this posted on the town's website somewhere for the us data junkies in town. There's 108 pages of data with just amazing historical data. A lot of it comes from the Massachusetts Hazard Mitigation Plan, but the Cape Ann and Boston from 1727 to 1755 had 13 earthquakes. So lots of interesting data, Mary Ann, for you and I, the data junkies. Please post this. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the reserve fund transfer. Aaron, you going to present this, or Sharon, who's going to be presenting this?
Here it is.
Great.
Gotta change apps now.
They need to sign it.
So the reason I have requested the reserve fund transfer is one of the things I was trying to do this year and working and kind of scrutinizing our budget as the year went on. We were kind of on target and on pace, and I was hoping to be able to hold a little bit of money back in a couple lines to be able to address this, the need for some of the OSHA training and documentation things. So I'd been evaluating Lexipol and Fire Rescue 1 for several months and gotten quotes, gotten information, and was trying to look at ways to, make it happen this fiscal year without having an impact on my budget. And, after we just got our last update, I just looked through the numbers and we're not going to be able to do that. And this is something that was unforeseen. It was because of the mandate that municipalities become OSHA compliant as of February 1. We've done a lot to try to be ahead of the curve. We had As a fire department, we voluntarily submitted to a state Department of Labor representative coming out and giving us an evaluation, giving us a full report with recommendations, and we received that about a week ago. And in part of our trying to address what the report requested, there were some highlighted things, which were training, and our policy and procedures were good, but we needed to verify, or needed to better verify training for our, we needed to implement a better hazard control plan. That's probably something that needs to be done town-wide, which once I finish our HAZCOM, it's something that I will submit to Town Hall to see if it's something we can incorporate that will help all departments. But, you know, the onus behind this is just trying to be ahead of the curve and make sure we address all the issues that have been identified in our report from OSHA. Like I think I've said before, we're in a lot better position in a lot of communities. We got a lot of positive feedback from the evaluator that came out. He was actually very surprised that we had a very thorough and somewhat comprehensive exposure control plan. Excuse me, I just had a post-concussion when I lose my train of thought like randomly, so I can't come up with the word, but our fit testing process, so our use of respirators and those things, so we had a comprehensive plan that actually some other departments have requested from me to use as a boilerplate, so we had some really good things in place, and this is all to address the weaknesses we had in the documentation piece and making it implementable but accessible to all members at all times. So, you know, being a call department, one of the challenges is, you know, I have 60 plus employees. Being able to ensure that every single person gets exposed to the policy and procedures and the specific training, you know, needs that are required can become difficult. I would have to offer these classes several times. These two pieces of software not only allow me to do that just as an assignment that they would do at their leisure online, it also verifies it and checks it and is defensible in the court of law. It's just they're all electronic signatures and everything. So the Lexipol piece is actually done by about 300 or 400 lawyers. There's a group of lawyers that do all of the policy procedure based on actual existing case law and legal precedent. So, and they update it anytime there's a case associated with any type of OSHA violations or anything else. So, from that standpoint, it's very positive for us. It, you know, limits the administrative costs that we may incur in potential operational cost, you know, in terms of keeping us, you know, up to date and keeping everything documented. The other piece is that I'll be able to readily produce a list or demonstrate proficiency for all of my personnel just by simply opening, you know, the software and saying, hey, here's everybody, they're verified and they're trained. And that's kind of the impetus behind it. I really thought I was going to be able to run my budget short in a couple lines to be able to make it happen, and I wasn't. I know now, and looking at the future projection, there's no way I could do it. So I just wanted to get it in, you know, feel like it's something that's important to the department and to the town in terms of it's a way for us to shed risk and liability onto third parties who are vetted and vested, and this is all they do.
So if I could, I spent a good part of my day today looking at proposed legislation at the general court that might impact local communities. And there's a fair number that are intended to protect firefighters. I was listening to presentations about how firefighters are often exposed to a whole variety of chemicals, and those chemicals can then have all kinds of physical effects, not just immediately, but over a period of time. So we were considering what are called presumptions, that if a firefighter gets cancer, for example, that it would be presumed to be related to firefighting duties and so on and so on. And after listening to all of that, the point I got, how important it is that attention be paid to the safety of firefighters. It's not just protecting them, which is an important thing, but it also protects the community from all kinds of
Absolutely.
financial obligations. And I'm not trying to say that in a negative way. We all appreciate what firefighters do. And if a firefighter gets injured, we owe it to that firefighter who put his life in danger. So this is a good idea to, part of putting the OSHA requirements on municipalities is to improve safety across the line. And you're the first department that I've heard of, maybe others here in Sherborn have done that, who is actively pursuing the implementation of OSHA training and education and all of those things. That's a good thing. And so my point is that this amount of money is short change compared to the potential exposure that the community has financially, and short change to the harm that could happen to firefighters. So I would support this with great enthusiasm.
Just have one question for Sharon. Where is the reserve fund at right now, and what have we already approved versus
198,000 right now.
198,000 remaining? Okay. Because we approved, it was at like 300,000 and we did the 100 for the
100,
trees,
yeah.
right? And then this
And
is,
then- Yeah, this, and then.
there was one other small one, right?
Something for Carol, yeah, it
Right,
was small
that's right.
though.
Yeah, the voting machine, I think, so.
Yes.
Okay.
That's right.
I just wanted to make sure, I always like to check where we're at before we approve something.
Yeah, and at last night's advisory committee hearing, as is the normal process, they want on any reserve fund transfer, they're interested in our recommendation before they're going to be voting on this on their Saturday session. It's a special agenda item. Yep.
Here's one question. So is this training one time, or is it annual, as we've done each year?
No, so when we have this, it'll be annual, and the thing that I really like about, the one thing I will say this, the police department uses Lexipol right now. We were able to get a discount because they use it as their primary means to update policy, procedure, case law, and you know, it's been very comprehensive and thorough for them. So every time there's a change or some new, or a precedent that they need to be trained on, they get bulletins in it. They go through it. It gives them like a quiz, and that's the verification that you've been exposed to the material, that you comprehend the material, and when you complete the test, it stamps it with the time and electronic signature. And you know, one of my big things was, does it protect us from liability? If, you know, if I implement this, my personnel do it, and we have some kind of issue, am I going to be able to stand in court and say, there's verification that this was done, and, you know, this is, you know, we took care of what we were supposed to take care of, we were proactive as a department, and the answer was unequivocally yes. They have several instances where their information, policy, and procedures, and the way that they have gone through and processed it to protect communities, but also the individuals on the fire departments and police departments, any public safety, is set up to make sure that they know and understand and comprehend the information and the different policy and procedures, and it does stand up well in court, and kind of that was one of the positives for me, is it kind of reduces the stress and gray hair for me to some degree. I'll be totally honest, because, you know, writing or trying to be completely, fully comprehensive with all of your policy and procedures as a fire chief can become very tedious and stressful, because something happens literally every week that has legal ramifications that, you know, I have to pay attention to in terms of, you know, how somebody responded to a house fire, what they did or didn't do in response to someone's emergency, all of those kind of things. And, you know, it can become really, really tedious and really take up an extreme amount of time to manage. And this definitely would help streamline and make that more efficient.
I guess the part of that question also was, is this cost going to be incurred every year?
Not the same cost. So that number will go down. There's an upfront cost, but the number would go down, and I have it accounted for, or would be accounted for in next year's budget through through some of the software costs. So there is an annual cost, but it will not be the same. It will go down. There's onboarding fees, the initial onboarding fee, and there's a comprehensive fee that they charge for cross-referencing all of our current policy procedures and then linking them to the updated system that we're going to implement so that the learning curve isn't so drastic. Basically, it'll link and attribute all the things we currently have in place and link it to whatever updates they make or whatever changes they make to make it compliant and cross-reference everything for us. So that number is going to be about, it'll be about 3/4 of that cost, but not that 9,000. So to maintain it, so for next year, Alexa pulled the following, actually, I wouldn't need it for next fiscal year. I wouldn't need it till the following year. So it would be 5,000 and about, say 2,800 would be the number, based on if it was today's prices and it was no onboarding and no, fees.
Any other questions? I would move approval of the recommendation of transfer of $9,804 from the reserve fund to purchase the OSHA policy and procedure software, including the training, safety, and documentation modules.
Second.
All in favor? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item, I don't know, John or Daryl, who's going to be presenting this, is consideration of soil and groundwater testing at Jameson Ball Field. Before we do that, I received calls from a couple people asking why the town would be considering to do this as part of the 41 North Main Street project. And my understanding is this is to establish a baseline, and if in fact it were for 41 North Main Street, my view would be that the developer should be paying the cost. But one of the questions that was asked was, why are town boards being advocates and proponents of the 41 North Main Street project? And I wanted to address that directly. At the informational meeting that we held on February 14th, a statement was made that there was, we'd already scheduled a special town meeting for July, which is not correct. I'm unaware of anyone on this board, and I'll give everyone a chance to express their own opinion, or anyone on the planning board or the Conservation Commission or the Board of Health that are advocates or proponents for this project. There have been discussions with this developer, just like there were with the elderly and affordable project proposed on Maple Street for Pulte, and just like there was for Coolidge Crossing. Those negotiations can go well or go poorly. For Coolidge Crossing, we ended up with a much smaller project with 95 out of 155 units being counted for affordable housing. And that was voted at a December 2017 special town meeting and was supported by 87% of the town. That was the result of long, lengthy negotiations. There were some abutters that were opposed to it, not surprisingly, but having discussions with a developer does not mean that anyone's a proponent. And I'll repeat it because I think we've said it before. I'm unaware of anyone on this board, Planning Board, Conservation Commission, or the Board of Health who is currently an advocate for this project. This project, at the December 14th meeting, every board asked questions, a lot of citizens asked questions. I started jotting down some of the questions that that were raised. They were all wonderful and important questions. I won't go through the list because there's almost 30 of them, but it is simply not accurate for there to be, I'll allow other members of the board, this board to speak, but I'm not aware of anyone on Planning Board, Conservation Commission, or Board of Health who at this point are advocates for this program. At this point, my personal view, one of 5 members, is that the project, I would not support having a special town meeting for it. I don't think there's enough in it for the town. That's my one individual personal view. But more to the point, none of these boards are advocating and pushing for this, but I want to let everyone else on the board chime in if they have a different perspective, because we've not taken any votes on this project, this board.
I'd like to add to that, that I think the job that we have, we were approached by a developer. They wanted to present, and I think it's the job of the boards to listen and ask questions of these developers and consider it. I mean, we want to work with them to try to figure out what the best solution for the town is. So when we're portrayed as being big advocates for it, when we've never taken a vote on anything, or we know that it's not ready for a special town meeting, and we've never even considered, I mean, when it was considered to go on the warrant, we immediately took it off because it wasn't ready. So I think that's important, and we have a history in the town of, if you look at Whitney Farms, for instance, we went through litigation for 10 years and ended up with a project that was worse than what was originally proposed, from what I've heard. I wasn't part of it back then, but it's worth talking to a developer instead of just saying no the minute they walk through the door. And I think people need to remember that and know that we're asking questions the same as the citizens are. We're not up here advocating for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable. I've seen it when I was on the planning board. I've seen it last year here. I've seen it in my day job. Whenever a large project comes in, it ultimately becomes polarizing, and especially in a town, you can't help but have the rumors and false narratives just go flying around, and it's it's just a part of the job. All we can do is be kind of above the fray and stick to what we're supposed to do in our procedures like that.
And I think, sorry, if you were.
It's clear what we saw on Valentine's Day was not ready for prime time. I don't think anyone really supported anything that large, and it was different than what we'd seen. But that doesn't mean we shut them out. We talk to them, we find out, and we vet things. I mean, that's what a proper board is supposed to do.
And tonight, this item that John's about to talk about, I think it's important for us, since the discussion has started about infrastructure, I think as a town, we need to look at it and say, do we need downtown infrastructure? Regardless of 41 North Main Street and what their plan is, we need to look at it and say, are we ready, do we need this water and sewer for our downtown? And is Jameson Field the right place for it? And then decide, as a town, how we want to pay for that. What, do we want to work with a private developer, or do we not? So,
The last thing I'll say too is, I always kind of actually enjoy these opportunities because it gives me my speech for people to have public involvement. You can ask John, I did this a million times in the planning board. People get involved when it affects them, but it helps, I encourage you to be involved all the time. Watch these on YouTube, come to these meetings, watch it on cable, go to the planning board meetings, and then you'll actually see what the truth is. If a neighbor or, one of your friends tells you something crazy, it might be. And, all of our emails are public. We all have contacts on there on the town's webpage. Reach out to David, reach out to one of us, and, find out, what we really think.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I agree with you. A lot of good questions were asked on the 14th of February. I don't think for people who are opposed to a project or want to see changes in a project or want to influence how elected officials or appointed officials think about a project, I don't think attacking the officials is a very constructive or appropriate strategy, particularly in a small town. I know it seems to be the way things happen in our country nowadays, but it's not a good feeling, and it doesn't really move the ball in a constructive direction. And I think the folks who have adopted that strategy know who they are. But overall, I think as a town, we've got a lot of smart people, and we've got a lot of people who care about the town, and we can come up with good decisions. I personally would like to see something happen at that property that's good for the town. I, like Chuck and others, don't think that the design and the project now is ready for prime time. I commend the developers and their professionals for trying to think through the project, trying to work with people who have questions, trying to work with the town. But they've got to do more homework, and they've got to bring the town something it can support if they want it to go forward. Their other option is to do something that's not going to need any special votes of the town, and that may be what we end up with. I don't know.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, the elderly and affordable bylaw that was passed, John, do you remember when that bylaw was passed by?
Originally?
Yeah, originally it was, that requires approval by the planning board of the information to be presented at special town meeting, and special town meeting, as it's the legislative body of the town, it votes up or down these projects. The Pulte project, which had Some good things, some bad things got voted down. Coolidge Crossing was passed by nearly 90% of the town. Town meeting is the body that makes this decision. Our job is to review it, to vet it, ask questions. That was one of the primary reasons for the Valentine's Day informational meeting. It was also so I didn't have to take my wife out to Valentine's dinner, but that's a different issue. And I thought it was a terrific meeting because there were lots and lots of questions that were asked. And that, the video of that has been posted, David, correctly? That's available on the town website. So the questions that were asked by Board of Health, Conservation Commission, Planning Board, Board of Selectmen, and, Select Board, and town citizens were terrific. I thought it was an outstanding meeting. Okay, John, do you want to
Well,
talk to about what this
maybe I
proposal is? Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Paul?
Just say, I think everybody knows that I've been a municipal lawyer for a very long time. Been a sitting town council for at least 30 years, maybe more. It's hard to keep track. So I'm probably the state's leading expert in things like DIF and TIFs and creation of water districts and sewer districts and application of Article 97. So as this project has come before the board a few times, I've indicated that there were parts of the project that I felt didn't work legally. And I've raised that a number of times. They're in the minutes of prior meetings. I can go through at length, but that wouldn't help here. My hope is that there can be a project that would work for the town, and part of that means to do it right. I don't see right now that we're on track to do it right. The things are being done out of order, and some things can't be done at all that are proposed. I also am quite hesitant about the size and the scope of the proposed buildings that are going in, the number of units, the impact that would have on the community. So I'd like to hear a lot more about that, about the impact on the community. And particularly I'm concerned that the developer is oversizing things because he feels that he has to finance things that may not be appropriately financed through that mechanism that's proposed. And so that there's, what's the best way to put it? I think there's a lot more thinking that has to go into this project before it's at a point that it's even viable. So I concur with the notion that it's not ready for a town meeting. We put it off from the annual town meeting. There hasn't been a discussion that at least involved me at this board. There was a couple of meetings I missed about any particular date for any particular special town meeting, so I'm not aware of anything being scheduled.
There's been none.
And I don't think it's ready to be scheduled. There's too many errors in the scheme that would have to be fixed along the way. So that's where I am on this.
Terrific. Anything else? If not, John, you want to present the soil and groundwater testing that you've been working on with Sean and the Board of Health?
Yeah, I think this is just one thing. The planning board had talked about this. I think everybody's talking about this town center opportunity with or without a developer involved. But we talked about a lot of issues, and we're kind of going around and around. Decided that there are a few things, as you folks have just said, there's some things that really need to be clear to find out if it's even feasible. And we decided that the testing of Jameson Field is to find out if it had the capacity to function as a wastewater treatment plant recharge area. If that doesn't, if it doesn't have the capacity, then we can stop that part of the whole conversation. So we thought there's a lot of different things that need to be understood, but we thought that was a fairly simple, kind of black and white answer kind of question that can get asked. So at your last meeting, in citizen comment, I suggested that, and here we are to talk about it. Since we met, the planning board discussed a lot of questions, and we had some great input, by the way, from citizens that also made our list better. So what I submitted to you was a list of questions specifically related to water and sewer, and we just tried to simplify it down and said, if the project was to go forward without defining the financing method or districts or anything like that, just from a water and sewer, and so I gave you a list. Our agenda tonight, and then we also said, okay, now here's research that we did to understand the proposed TIF type of financing relative to others. So that's also in a memo we sent you. But our agenda tonight is really just Jameson Field. So when it comes right back down to it, we still think that's a good place to go to find out if the concept of this project is feasible. And some testing had been done in the past, or some observation of some digging that had been done in the past. We think it's really important that that be observed by the Board of Health expert. I know there's subsequent to the planning board meeting, there's been discussion about, well, maybe that could even be an expert that's even more expert in wastewater treatment plant than our Board of Health agent. But in any case, we think doing some testing of Jameson Field is a very good way to find out if it's feasible. Whether you're for or against the project, we want objective, factual information, and so we think that's a good place to start.
And my understanding, this is also just to establish a baseline of the data for that field. There's already an existing septic field there for Pine Hill, but Daryl, the Board of Health, what's your perspective on this?
I'll come over here.
I'll say there's a mic somewhere.
Mr. Microphone's over there.
Let's see, a few of the items. All right, so Sean and I met very briefly this afternoon. Received a proposal from consultants that the town uses already, and we just went through what they were proposing. To do this, I'll just go through a little of the mechanics. We need an application, just the paperwork saying what's going to be done and where, and we need a diagram of the area that's going to be tested. Changes can be made out in the field depending on what's found when you do that, but we need someone to do that and present it and file for doing this kind of thing in town. So that would just be a mechanical thing that an outside consultant can do. John mentioned, having more of an expert in wastewater systems for the discharge, the groundwater discharge. Unless you're doing something unusual, the systems are not much different than a septic, they're just larger. So there's not much different in that, and the soil evaluation and depth to groundwater is the same in those cases. Let's see, I've already lost, is there something else? Oh, you mentioned the Pine Hill already has a septic system there. It was built on or before 1971. So they are not the least bit modern systems. And we don't have a lot of information in the Board of Health files on that. I did check, just today we pulled some information of what exists, and this is a bit of a departure, but I'll just throw it in now so everyone knows it. On information about soil, groundwater conditions at 41 North Main, since that's been a question of, would they do this project on that site? And it appears that for the areas tested, and I don't know why, they may have tested more areas, but for what we have on record in the Board of Health, it's areas close to Main Street and spanning, though, from Hunting Lane down to the edge of their property to the south. So the testing's been done along there, and there are a few spots that might have adequate depth to groundwater, but for the most part, it's shallow to bedrock and shallow to groundwater is what's been found. And we'd have to keep in mind larger systems will have mounding beneath them, so you need even a little bit more area. For the work, I don't know, Sean, if you want to talk about this too, we were talking about if we're to do test pits in Jameson, just have to pick some spots, test them, coordinate around where the playing areas are and not disrupting that. And it would be helpful to have someone who's worked with bigger systems if we're at some point going to look at exactly what we would need for wastewater treatment, whether there are innovative systems we could use, would that change what we would need as in terms of leaching areas. So if there was a firm we could identify up front who could do this thing that's fairly nitty-gritty and basic for now, but has the potential to do the other and would be part of the process through, that would be nice. I don't know if we could find that, but we could try. So anyway, we need to do test pits. They need to be observed. Surely this firm would have someone who is also a soil evaluator, just as the health agent is. And in my experience, when they're out in the field together, they're discussing it. They're discussing what they're seeing, and they're comparing notes, and they're analyzing it, and they're working it through together. So I would assume that would be the dynamic. We talked about the issue of having people have talked about having the developer there to observe. That would be fine. I think just on a legal front, the town would want to think about not just having all of them, but perhaps specifically a professional for this activity, because you'd want to make sure that they have the safety awareness and the insurance and the, they'll fulfill responsibilities regarding not causing a hazard or falling into the pit or what have you. So, but that would be for legal. Anything you want, Sean? Anything? I mean, it's a fairly straightforward procedure. It's done all the time in Sherborn, so it just sounds bigger because it's for a bigger project, but it's really a pretty basic.
Do we have an estimate on the cost?
This proposal, 7,500.
7,500 is what I'd heard.
Is this, I was going to ask, this Stantec proposal that we had sitting here, is that a company that you would be comfortable using, Daryl? Is that somebody that?
I don't know much about them. I do know, I recognize some of the names from,
I'm not good share.
they were with other companies in the past, and I know that they have done work in town because I met them for some of the stormwater management and seen them at conferences. They're a global firm. I did read up that they've done some wastewater treatment plants that are going to be doing them for Portland, Oregon. Sounded progressive, hard to know. I couldn't tell what the local office is experienced with, but it sounds like this particular company has experience in this general area.
I thought I
How you would
recognized,
tap into that, I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I think it would be worth trying to.
I thought I recognized the name. Have they done testing in town before, Stantec?
No.
They're
And
around.
I
I've worked
actually
with
think that is probably a good idea. I think it might be awkward to hire somebody that we deal with all the time.
I think that's good. I really do, I like the idea of using an independent firm that, like you said, doesn't have any history with Sherborn or.
Oh, and, no, we have engineers who do beautiful work.
Right.
in
No, but I'm
town,
saying, like,
but
this.
I still
I like
think
the idea
that-
of a truly independent observation of the, conclusion of this study rather than using our own stuff. I think this is the right way to go about it.
We have two other existing contracts with Stantec.
Okay.
I mean, I think to clarify, I think the expectation would be that the Board of Health agent would be there.
Oh, absolutely. That, of
Has to be
course,
there,
of
yeah.
course.
So if I could, this is one of those areas that I've already opined on. Last, I think, October, I reviewed the deeds into the town for this property, and also the means by which the town acquired the property. And I had said at that time that this property's not an appropriate one for this particular use, not just inappropriate, but not legal. It's not consistent with the deed restrictions, and it's not consistent with Article 97 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth, because it was preserved, it was purchased for open space and recreation and no other use. The use of this land for commercial and business and residential waste is not allowable.
Is
And-
it currently being used for that, though, Paul?
No, it's not to my knowledge.
It is. She just said the Pine Hill septic system is on those fields.
That's not a business or commercial.
But I'm saying we're talking about a municipal sewer, and Pine Hill is a municipal septic system.
No, but it's commercial waste from the whole point of having this sewer system is to take care of the downtown business area. It's just a classic violation of law. But even if it wasn't, my view is that if people convey property to the town for the purpose of open space and recreation, and we ignore that, and we violate that trust, we're breaking our word, our promise to those people. So who else would ever want to give property to the town if they donated some land for conservation purposes, and then we found it convenient to do it for something else, that we'd go ahead and try to figure out some obscure way to use it for some other purpose. It's just, in my view, very bad public policy. So in private discussions with the developer, I suggested that they look at other properties such as the CM&D Butler Street facilities, see if anything could be done there, but not on land that was deed restricted this way. So this, to me, this expenditure of money is a complete waste of taxpayer dollars. Even if it's paid by the developer, it's a dead end. The more time we spend on a dead end, the less time we're spending on real solutions and looking for ways to make improvements. This is a complete waste of time. So I will not support this.
Can I make a comment? I
Two
just want to make one comment on this. As we've discussed, the change of use on this, after this is all done and there's a leaching field underneath, it's 100% still going to be used as ball fields, actually brand-new ball fields, which I would think the Recreation Department would support having brand-new ball fields paid for. So a leaching field, what we've talked about in the past here is that it wouldn't change the use, so I don't see a harm in testing to see, as the planning board's working on a downtown plan, not necessarily for, as I said earlier, 41 North Main put aside, we're having a discussion about what's right for the infrastructure for our downtown, and I know with the general plan from the planning board, we want to know what our possibilities are for the downtown, and I think this is a worthwhile test to see what is there.
It's not the first time it's been discussed. So the Charles River Watershed Association conducted a smart sewering study on behalf of the town of Framingham and recommended discharge into the ball fields. So at some point, there's been discussed for years. The data point may be interesting. They have a data point there. And like we said, this project is so early that as it evolves over whatever time frame, obviously we'll have to do a true legal counsel opinion as far as the status of the ball fields.
So Eric, did they eventually put in a discharge in a ball field?
You mean, like,
Framingham?
Framingham? No, I'm at Sherborn, like Charlesville Watershed Association did the
Oh,
smart.
you said
mentioned Framingham.
Okay.
I flip it around.
You forgot which town you're in.
Not the city. Correct, Charlesville Watershed Association did it on behalf of Sherborn.
Okay.
And recommended these Jameson ball fields for their discharge point, you know.
Okay,
And so it's just, my point being here, we've gone through studies, we've looked at it, it's been talked about for years and that there. So it's nothing new, and maybe the data will be interesting. I wouldn't mind trying to approach a developer to at least, pay for half of it or something like that, to be honest. Because being done to some degree, for his interest in the short term, it might be in the town's interest in the long term.
So one thing,
A few years ago, just a few years ago.
Yeah. Was it 14, 15, something like that?
You have 15 of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I think it was 14, 15.
So this century, barely.
Some-
1915.
something else that Sean and I talked about was typically you don't have heavy activity taking place on top of a leaching field. Can disrupt the system in a variety of ways. So one thing we'd want to understand is how much could it tolerate, because the kinds of equipment that might be running over and maintaining the fields is heavier than a home tractor, even though that might also be used. The ones I've seen for larger systems associated with commercial or condo developments and that kind of thing are often fields that are infrequently mowed. So we just need to understand what it would mean. Would you have to restrict activity in some way in those areas? You certainly wouldn't put it under a diamond, but
Can I ask just a real basic question? So the Board of Health and Planning Board are both recommending that we spend the $7,500 to do this testing, is that correct?
the Board of Health hasn't had a chance to take that kind of a vote. What we're saying is that we think the Board of Health should participate in the activity if the town chooses to go ahead with that. And the only way you're going to know if that will work is by testing. I will say that our agent pulled files that we had that were close to that area, or in that area. So the most recent system and testing in the ball fields was done in connection with the fire station when it needed a septic replacement, and I forget the year of that now, but it wasn't that long ago. Groundwater was, I don't remember the exact numbers, around 3 feet. So there is a mound out there for that. And then there's a few properties along Main Street that had depths of 4 to 5, roughly. But there is a little bit of an uphill there, perhaps. So in any case, it's pretty close. It may not have the depth of groundwater that's needed. The testing that was done back in the fall was, they didn't hit water, but that was the drier period of the year, and there was no seasonal high groundwater adjustment analysis done in connection with that. So we don't know what that number would have come out to be, so.
As a follow-up follow-on to Paul's question, is there a value in getting this data regardless of 41 North Main Street? I mean, is there, just putting that development completely aside, is this data helpful to the town?
I would say if the town wants to know whether it could put something there, you can't do it without the data unless we do it.
So if the town itself
Some kind
wanted-
of surface or very different kind of treatment, but if you're looking at a more standard, putting it underground, you have to know that. So, I don't know, Matt, would you add anything else to
I
that?
think it's a question of if Article 97 land can't be used for this, then no, there's no value to doing it. If Article 97 land can be used for this, then I think you'd say, get the information to know what you know. I think that was sort of the sentiment of the board, was to say we want to make sure that appropriate oversight and structures and health and preserved. I think that was the primary focus. I don't think they had the proposal for the particular engineer. It was more conceptual of, you know, do you think it's worth having a specialist? I think we said, yes, that would probably be helpful.
Perfect. Sean?
The fire station, Pine Hill septic system, and and a massive water recharge for all the stormwater at Pine Hill are in that field. This data, if we need to upgrade Pine Hill's system, which probably should have done when we did all those additions, we have to have this data. So if we have this data, 5 years from now, it's not going to change. We can utilize that to upgrade the system. If the fire station system fails, we're going to need this data. Because it's the only place you could put the fire station system.
I'd be curious if the mound is near the stormwater recharge. I didn't realize the stormwater recharge was there, because that mound's groundwater. If the mound that you observed is near that, just more curious.
Sorry, Eric, can you speak up? I couldn't hear you.
He said that, I didn't realize that there was actually stormwater recharge from Pine Hill in there, and that mound's groundwater. It's commonly does it, and Daryl spoke that there was a mound out there, so I was curious if it was nearby.
For the
Mounted
fire
system,
station,
yeah.
they had to add more
At a
soil.
mounted system, yeah, I see. But the 3-foot depth of groundwater, I mean, it's very shallow.
Chuck, I just wanted to answer your earlier question. The planning board voted in favor of doing this testing before we had a quote, but very much voted in favor of this to find out if it's a showstopper. We did not talk about Article 97 conflict, but I feel it would be the same type of discussion. If it's a showstopper, we'd like to know. So, obviously, the town council's opinion, or if there's a, we're just in favor of finding out whether this direction is feasible or not, and we think this is a good place to start.
Any other questions up here?
Marion.
Yeah.
Just to add a little more to what
And who are you?
Marion, my drug company, Prospect Street, planning board. Is this working?
We finally get a mic, and it's a weird mic that you can't even figure out how to work.
I've never seen a mic that looks like that. What is it?
Looks like a Wi-Fi
It's a
thing.
lightsaber.
He asked to talk in.
I need some training. You'll need training on
The battery's
after all that, it's a really small comment.
So where's the backup battery?
In your bag?
Right. I'm wanting to do these tests in the ball fields, putting the Chapter 97 issue aside because they didn't address that. It's more than just whether anything can be done at 41 North Main. It really is independent of 41 North Main because for years there's been a realization that the septic and well situation in the town center is not going to be good forever. We're getting by now, but we need to think far ahead on that issue, and this is just good data to have, so that if we have an emergency need for some septic recourse for town center, or if, as the general plan proposes, if after all the data are in, we decide that it's good to try to put in infrastructure in the town center, we still need these data.
So, Daryl, is there a window of time when this can be done? Is that why we're proposing it now?
It is preferable to be doing it now because it is the high groundwater season typically, and it removes some uncertainty around, unless you have very clear models, it removes some uncertainty in the calculations.
I think it also, if we do it, the sooner that we do it, the less disruptive it's going to be to baseball season.
I haven't heard anything today that says we need this data this year or right now, except for the North Main project. And Eric's comment that the developer may want to cost share this makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, if we're doing it now in a year where we've got, money troubles, trying to cut budgets, and we want to do it this spring for that reason, then I think there should be some cost share, and we should, if we're going to go ahead, it should be with the understanding that we go ahead only if there's a cost share. If there's other reasons, I see Roger standing up, if the idea is that we're at a point in our discussion of downtown water and sewer where this is an important year for finding that information out independently of the project, then maybe that's not as critical. But until whatever Roger's going to say right now, I had not heard that this spring was a critical time for doing this testing.
Well, we've
just developed this long-range plan for the town, and one of the initiatives is what do we do with downtown? And a principal question is, can we do anything without doing water and sewer? And I'd remind everybody that the town center, if you count both the north and south sides, more than a third of the sewage is generated by town-owned facilities. On top of that, you can add several houses, churches, things like that. So when you're all done, it's less than half of business demand on this thing. But, you know, if you take in the whole neighborhood, you really need to consider the fact that it's a town need in the future. The sooner we know that, the sooner we can start working on detailed plans about what we can do to either try to maintain the town center or improve it. So it's a good junction. We've got a good plan to work on, and this is one of the key elements of information that we really need to know.
Comments, Neil? Yeah, with the mic and.
If you have a battery. Hey, Neil Kessler, 43 Page Farm Road. I just had a couple of comments. One, I wanted to say that while this data can have other applications, it feels as if just the discussion itself is sort of bootstrapping us into a larger application. And while I don't doubt that that's maybe appropriate at some point, we're really here tonight because we're talking about 41 North Main Street and whether a project of that size and then projects that would also be large and contributing a lot of effluent, whether the ball fields are a good place for that to be. And I think from the beginning of the discussion of 41 North Main Street as a project, there's been sort of these implementation questions that are being asked and answered first, and I think that's sort of driven some of the alarm I think that the town has had about the project and whether it's going forward in too fast a manner or too hasty a manner. Because the way I sort of try to look at all these kinds of projects is, you know, before we start saying, can we put sewage in the ball fields, we should really be asking, is this a project or any large project like this a good fit for the town? We have a master plan that's about to come out. It's newly minted, and I don't think that 41 North Main Street fits with that at all. So for me, the first question is not, can we do it? The first question is, should we do it? And once we answer that, then we can ask the places where we could put it, whether it's by CM&D or somewhere else. And so I think we're sort of still going backwards with it. The other thing I would say is that there are things that are, in addition to whether we can do it, we should be asking whether the odor is appropriate, whether our kids would be affected by either the odor or dispersants used to get rid of the odor. And George, you had mentioned, Mr. Morrow, you had mentioned you think that the rec department or the rec commission would look favorably upon a new ball field, and yet nobody has asked them their opinion about this at all. In fact, I reached out
Neil,
to...
that's not true. I actually called Dave Goldberg last week, and I haven't received a phone call, so I have reached out to them.
Okay, I did actually also correspond with him, and sort of one of his questions, for example, was, because I asked him if he had heard about it and what his thoughts were, and he just said, well, we haven't met about it at all, but just off the top of my head, one of his questions was, I need to understand how it could limit our use of the fields down the road. I know we currently have to consider the Pine Hill leaching fields for project near J4, and this potentially limits our options in those fields. And so the only thing I would just say is that I really do think that we still need to wrap our heads around a project like 41 North Main, whether it's ready to go, what advantages it has or disadvantages, before we actually start looking at spending town money on implementation details. So, thank you.
Can I ask you something, Neil? You seem not to have any issue with relocating CM&D to put a leach field there, but you don't want to relocate the ball fields?
Oh, no. I'm not saying that. I just said, because somebody else said something about maybe, I think it was Paul who said, about potentially siting it somewhere else. I don't know enough about the CM&D site either. I'm just saying that I think it's better for us to sort of conceptually understand what the project is and whether we ought to go forward with it at all before we start looking at implementation details that are very specific. That's just my thought on it.
Yeah, I think just from a planning standpoint, we're locking ourselves in if we think the ball fields are the only thing that place can ever be used for. It's great that we have those now, and I assume if they weren't there, they'd be someplace else, and we'd figure that out, obviously, before we moved them away, but that, that land isn't inherently ball field. It just happens to be ball field now because that's the best use the town has found for it, and it was, developed that way.
Sorry, I'm confused, though, because I thought Paul was said that was given to the town for recreational use. Is that not the case?
If it's given for the town for recreational use, that's fine. That doesn't mean you can't vote through Article 97 to make it useful for something else, so.
Understood. So it's on the table then that we would actually move the ball fields?
Is it on the table? Did you just put it on the table? I'm just raising it as an issue.
Nobody's ever mentioned moving ball fields.
That's why I was asking.
No, what I mentioned was not moving the ball field, was thinking outside the box that this is not inherently a ball field. It's a piece of land that the town owns that we're trying to figure out whether it's useful for some other purpose.
I see. I understand. Thank you.
I think Sean had his hand up too in the back.
Yeah, this gentleman was first.
Jay Somerville, 24 Honey Lane. I'd like to just go back to
Can you talk in the mic, please?
Yeah,
what Paul said earlier. I mean, it's pretty clear, as an attorney, a municipal expert, his opinion is that land cannot be used for this purpose. Should that not be determined before we go testing it?
Yeah, I have a slightly different perspective. If this isn't for town to have a baseline, if it is for 41 North Main, clearly there should at least be a split. I'm not even sure I support a split, because I just think this project, at this point, it's not worth paying the town's part of that split, if that's the purpose.
I think I agree with that, too.
If the purpose is to
I
get,
agree wholly with that.
if the purpose is to get the data for that project, I don't want the town paying for it. I'm not even sure I want to split it 50-50, because I just think the project at this point is, in my opinion, dead in the water, based on what I've seen. But
But you just had Roger tell us that it would be helpful to have data from the town's purpose.
exactly, that's,
You want to have David see if he'll approach the
And
developer
and Sean as well. I mean,
fund it?
I said that this data is helpful
Right.
for, maybe not, as you said, Mike, maybe it's not imminent right now. I just think if it's in the season, do we do it this year or do we do it a year from now? But if it's an infrastructure question, I see it as an infrastructure question. I said this all along tonight, 41 North Main Street aside, we've started this discussion again. We've talked about it for years and years about water and sewer. And with the general plan coming out, I think it's a great time for us to determine, do we want water and sewer in our downtown? Whether we have a development at 41 North Main Street or not, let's answer that question.
Sean, you had a comment?
Two.
You want to go up to the mic and tell us who you are?
I don't think he needs a mic.
He doesn't even need a mic.
Sean Plain. I'm an abutter to several of those properties, but I will say that we spent probably 3 times that amount of money just working on that recharge system that's in those fields, because it's been failing for years. It would have helped to have that data. We dug them up and tried to restone them, but we've added the amount of stormwater coming off of Pine Hill and not upgraded that system for about 40 years, so. That data would help. If we have to rebuild that recharge system, we'll need that data in here.
What's the data you would need, though? What's the,
The soil and groundwater data. That's the first thing you need before you put a recharge system in.
but is that something that health agent can do? When you were in here 2 weeks ago, Sean, you were talking about bringing a town backhoe over there and having the health agent look in the hole. Now we've got a $7,500 proposal from Stantec, which is fine if that's what we need to have, but if we really only need a town backhoe and the health agent, then to get the info you need.
No, I didn't propose just the health agent. They wanted to make sure the health agent was involved. We need an engineer to do it, and it's observed by the health agent. Could it be done cheaper? Sure.
Well, we don't need-
There's
we
a
cer-
multi-use for that data.
Yeah,
But
we
we don't
right.
need that much data. We
Okay.
may have fixed the recharge system now, and it might be good for 10 years. I'm not sure. We'll find out if water starts coming out the drain like a couple of weeks when we get high water.
We've seen that before.
Right now, you can go out there in this water 8 feet below the field, so.
Well, my problem with all this is that recharge has been there for years. The septic system for Pine Hill was there for years. I'm aware of probably more information than the Board of Health has, I guess, because I've been around for a while, so I know a great deal about the geology over there. But it just seems implausible to believe that suddenly this request comes up in the context that so far had been 41 North Main, and now we're suddenly saying, oh, it's not the 41 North Main at all, it's really because you're worried about recharge from Pine Hill.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the data isn't solely for 41 North Main. We have the ball field there, we have several septic systems in the ball field and a recharge system. So that's data that Roger's group would have liked to have for the past 10 years. We've been talking hypotheticals forever. Town Center Water Options Committee hasn't moved the needle in 10 years. It would be good to do something. We haven't tested a well, we haven't tested any soils, that's fine. And I want to make another point about CM&D. Keep in mind, CM&D is town forest. It would take an act of the legislature to do anything on that 30-acre parcel.
The other thing,
It's just a town forest parcel, you can't do anything.
Paul, when I say independent of 41 North Main, 41 North Main is what sparked the infrastructure question, yes. But I'm saying now, my interest is, do we need infrastructure in the downtown? That's where this discussion has led.
But I don't think there's any serious debate that we need infrastructure in the downtown area. But if you recall from a prior discussion, I've done this before in other communities many times, and the place you have to start is the creation of a water district or a sewer district. You really need to draw that on a map, and then you need a special act of the legislature, and you really need to nail that piece down. If you don't nail that piece down first, then you end up shooting yourself in the foot, because the further down you go on this road, the more you're opening up the whole community to unwanted development, where people can come in and take advantage of all the work that you're doing at our expense, and the next thing you know, we have all kinds of things that you don't want to have. So you need to start with some town meeting votes for creation of districts, and this is stuff I told Roger a year ago or 2 years ago, whenever he was last here. I've done this before. You got to start first with protecting the community. Then after you protect the community, then you work within that area. Then you know what your volumes are, what your capabilities are, what you need, all those things. But until you get there, until you created that district, you're just committing suicide, to be blunt, by proceeding the way you're proceeding with this. This is the tail wagging the dog. So it's just the wrong way to go. Pardon me, I didn't mean to get so worked up about it, but it's stuff that I've already reviewed with everybody. It's not anything that's new.
Well, I think we've got a threshold question, Paul, because at this point, according to you and others, we have no place in town that we can get water from, and we have no place in town that we can put sewage effluent.
That's not true at all.
Well, where would you suggest that be put?
Where water comes from?
Where does water come from, and where does
the
sewer
sewer
go?
go?
So let's take water first.
Let's do that.
If you know that we settled the Whitney Farms 40B with their agreement to provide a public water well that would tap into the Holliston aquifer. It's unlimited aquifer, it's good water, we got a deed, we got everything we need. We have the circumference, we have the Zone 1, we have the Zone 2, we have proven water quality, doesn't need any treatment, so on and so on. We have a water source if we wanted to use it.
And we would pipe it 2 miles across town and then keep everybody along that route from tying into it?
That's why you have to create the district first. But he was asking me where we were going to get water. I'm telling you where prior boards were figuring out where to go with getting water. Secondly, the question is, where does the sewer go? The point is that we can make significant improvements in the downtown area with either water or septic. We don't necessarily have to accomplish both at the same time. If we provided water, we would have a considerable step forward. If we provided sewer, we would have a considerable step forward. Trying to do both at the same time, I can tell you from having done water and having done sewer, both of those are very difficult undertakings. to try and do both at the same time in a small community like Sherborn, where's the money to pay for this? I understand then we get to the point of let's have 120 units of this and 90 units of that in order to pay for it. But this is like the most expensive way to go about this.
I'm going to miss this, Paul, but, you know, we've got a well on the side, of the Ashland side of town. You've said it's an unlimited aquifer, and yet you think we can define a district in the center of town and run a pipe 2 miles and not let anybody tie in for 40B or any other reason?
Yes.
Okay.
Do
Good
that.
luck.
I've done that in many communities.
If the
That's
well
great.
goes bad, I thought if the well went bad, actually you couldn't stop them because you're essentially, what do you call it, make the house unoccupiable. I thought if there's any public water supply or even public sewer and a well or septic goes bad and can't be repaired, that they have by right.
I think
to tap
that's a
into it.
riskier strategy.
That's
Paul,
why-
honestly.
that's why
I think
you
it's a
go-
riskier strategy to do it that way.
To the legislature, becomes a state law.
Yeah, let's take one more comment, and then we've got a very full agenda. We're going to be here till midnight, so, you, sir.
I won't be here till midnight, I'm leaving.
John DeSalvo, 44 North Main. I just had a question around two questions actually. One is around the Article 97. Is it two things? Is it just the Article 97, or is it also the way the deed was conveyed or the land was conveyed as a gift? Are they two separate issues?
Two
or
separate
the
issues.
exact Same thing.
Two separate issues, entirely separate. The deeds are restricted. That's one issue. Secondly, because of the way the property was acquired, it's what's called protected land. Now, Article 97 land, you can get a 2/3 vote of the legislature to override that. It has to be a roll call vote. But in order to do that, the legislature is requiring replication 4 times. So we would have to figure out the area of the ball fields and replicate that 4 times somewhere else in town. And the cost of buying land in Sherborn, I assume the developer would be the one to pay for it, to replicate that. I don't know what the cost is, but I don't see it happening.
In
But
addition to...
but even if you got the legislature to do that, in order to void the deed restrictions, there are ways to do that. You'd have to go to court and try to say that the limitations that were in the conveyance no longer serve a valid public purpose, and so on and so on. You can get a court to turn that aside, but this is like very expensive way to go and uncertain of outcome.
So the deed part of it is a family that gave a gift to the town for the purpose of recreation, only for that purpose. That's the deed.
Open space and recreation.
The other thing that I had is if in an emergency, we went through all of this because there is an emergency and we had to find another use to use the ball field, you know, adding another 160 units of affluent to that ball field, you know, that's a stretch beyond the emergency. Just my thought.
Yeah, and as Daryl's pointed out, it's not, there's also a question about what the nature of that affluent, because it includes presumably
I'm just saying, like,
pharmaceuticals.
if we didn't do the 160 units, let's say, and we had to use the ball field, I could see a stretch to save the town, but to save the town and then add another 160 units to dump there, you know, seems.
Eric?
Yeah, just a quick thing to, at least on this agenda item. Given Sean's concern on existing use, and I actually used the data for the existing use of Pine Hill and so on, it may be worth just having David call the developer, so he'll split the cost. $3,750 isn't that bad to have this data, especially, you know, when we do need it, if it is, what do you call it, not taking in the stormwater or what have you there, and then it has to be reconstructed again, then it may be worth just a split, you know, the timing and so on like that. Second thing is maybe, we've talked about this in circles, this has to be like the 5th time it's come up about Article 97, and, you know, as much as some people want to make it black and white, everyone has different opinions. And I think maybe it's that time we approach council to get an opinion on this.
I was just going to suggest that I think we should have David talk to town council and get our town council's opinion on Article 97 on this property.
I think it's a great idea, but I do also want to point out, and I thank Paul for his clarification earlier, that Paul has now acknowledged that there are ways to get through Article 97 and get through the deed restrictions in the gift. And so if we needed to use this land, there may be ways to use it. It may be very expensive. It probably would be, as Paul said, but it's not as crazy an idea as it was portrayed to be earlier.
Yeah, and I would support it, not for purposes of 41 North Main, but for purposes of whether or not the future town water and municipal systems.
But if we're
would-
going to do that, let's get a different proposal, because this proposal is geared towards
Yeah.
a wastewater treatment plant, and it's from one of the more expensive engineering firms.
Yeah, I think that was the next thing I was going to say. I don't think we should vote on this one tonight. I think we should get some additional quotes and hear from the Board of Health that they actually want, they think this testing is necessary. Or you said you hadn't had a chance to vote on, or approve a firm that you guys think would be giving you the data that you need.
That we could work on with CM&D and whoever else wants to help review proposals. The Board of Health was not determining whether this project is necessary. We're saying that this testing is necessary if you want to go ahead with this kind of project. And I just wanted to add another logistical thing to consider, and that is on timing. Soil evaluations and groundwater determinations are only good for a certain amount of time. I don't know what the DEP's requirement is on that. Part of it, one of the reasons for that is that development may alter stormwater runoff characteristics and therefore affect where you might find groundwater. So the determination's only good for a certain time period. I don't know what DEP requires, and if we're going to do this, we may want to have DEP observing as well, if they are going to be the ultimate regulator of a system of this type. So that's another thing just to consider in the logistics of scheduling this sort of thing.
Any other discussions up here?
No, but I thought we were to the point where we were looking to do something to get Sean his data on stormwater and not necessarily for a system at this point.
Yeah, it's unclear to me why we can't use the CM&D backhoe and Mark Morum to gather that data. John?
John Higley, 14 Saddlebrook Road. I want to remind you that the reason I brought this up, the planning board thought this was a good thing to do, as a go, no-go kind of piece of information that would help. And the reason for it now is really, there's an opportunity, there's an opportunity that's may or may not be possible to enable to the town's advantage. If it turns out that a development that is of a size and scale and features and characteristics and impacts that are desirable to the town, that would enable the town to have water and sewer and/or sewer in the town center, then let's take advantage of that opportunity. If the developer decides to go ahead without this project and do something else on their land, then this opportunity is lost. So it's not to say that we have any concurrence or agreement or anything on the size or scale or anything else to do with the development. It's just to say, is this a go, no-go kind of decision on the opportunity? So that's the reason for us bringing it to you at this time.
Do I have a motion up here? Okay, I think the recommendation is to get a different proposal. I personally don't favor splitting it with the developer because I'm interested in the data not related to 41 North Main, but for the other reasons that were articulated. But I think that may be a minority view up here based on the opinions that I've heard. This proposal clearly is, the Stantec proposal that I see is clearly geared towards that.
You could ask them to fund it all.
Yeah.
Essentially, you still have the data, you still what have you.
Right,
It's not
my
a
goal is
comment,
to-
actually through the planning board, what's that called? Gino? Chapter something funds or whatever, when you get the mitigation funds, or you get the 53.
But they don't have an application.
I know, they don't, yeah, I know.
And they have not specifically
Willingly.
asked for this data, have they? They've not asked us to do this this. They haven't proposed it to us. It's being done because we think it's a good idea. I mean,
Yeah, Marion?
I'm speaking as an individual now, Marion Neutra, 25 Prospect Street, not as a member of the planning board, because John may not agree with me, others may not. But my feeling after listening to the discussion tonight is that this may be data that we want to have, but it's not crucially important to have it necessarily this spring. And I'm concerned about the optics of getting it done this spring and getting it done paid in part by the developer. The optics, I think, are not good because I have to agree with others that have said we really need to decide first on is the 41 North Main project, as we're seeing it now, something that we want in town center. If not, it takes the pressure off of us to make the decision right now about town water and sewer, although I think in the long term, we do need to make that decision. But I don't want it to look as if we are doing this for that particular development, and I'm afraid that's what it will look like.
Terrific. Okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda then, which is the consideration of the revocable license agreement between the town and the Sherborn Yacht Club. We talked a couple of months ago about entering into a long-term lease agreement to have the yacht club to move their dock off of the private property it's currently situated on, to move it onto town property. The board, Mike and Paul in particular, suggested that we do it as a long-term lease, or self-renewing or revocable lease with license, I'm sorry, thank you, and with the town having abilities to dictate and control and monitor the adherence to the license terms. So David is not presenting it.
well, I've got some comments on this too, if you
Yeah.
want.
I have comments too.
Yeah, I do as well. Great.
Last time we appeared, it was to table a discussion about a revocable license, and that's, I think, the conclusion we came up with the Board of Selectmen, and we were looking to see some language, hopefully, that council's provided, that we were told might be available by this time. We're under a tight time schedule with how we set up the docks and everything. We start before, usually right after the ice breaks, we start getting the club ready. It's all volunteer work. It's very difficult to organize and get all these people together and get everyone ready to go for the season. So we usually start that process in March, and we're in March now, and we're not exactly sure where we're going to be come May. So that would be why I've been pushing Diane, I guess, in front of you and try to get.
Have you seen the draft license
We've
agreement?
not seen anything.
Oh, okay, that's unfortunate.
That's unfortunate, although, actually not that unfortunate, because I have a number of changes.
Yeah, although,
I do a lot of technology licensing, and there's some improvements that can be made to this agreement.
So you want the intellectual property rights to their dock? is
No,
that-
I want some of the definitions to be changed. I do want the royalty stream. You are correct about that.
Yeah, and same here, although I think the structure works, and I think that, I thought we had kind of a consensus on the board that this was the way to do it, and that we
Yes,
were willing
we
to
do.
do it.
We do.
Should we walk through and make comments, or how do you want to do this?
That may be unfair to them.
Because they haven't seen it?
Because they haven't seen it, so maybe we should,
I think we need to talk
This-
about our comments so we can give
Yeah.
town council some instruction on how to revise it.
and have them come back with a version that we could give to them, because the sense is, we want to give you a license, we want you up and running, we're supporting what you do, we welcome your contribution to the community, as providing amenities to people, and
So maybe there's some points, Paul, where we do have to ask them some questions, though, to get the comments across. Like, one of my comments was, the town council has asked if the town intends to charge a fee for the dock. I don't know that we need to charge a fee for the dock, but on the other hand, if there are additional costs to the town that are, attributable just to the yacht club use. I think it's fair. You guys charge a nominal membership to people. If it went up 50 cents or something because you had to pay the town something, that wouldn't probably be a big deal for anybody, but we should not be subsidizing a private, even if it's a public-private venture on the pond. So that's a kind of a threshold question. Do we have costs that we need to recover on this? And if so, how much are they? And is the yacht club able and willing to pick that up? And
Right.
I don't know the answer to that question. Other comments I had were I assume these boats would be...
Before you leave that.
Okay, go ahead.
let me First indicate, A, agreement with that, and B, the concept that I want to see in here is that we charge them like $1 a year for the use of the space, but that all the expenses that are associated with it,
Okay,
of any kind,
that's a good idea.
Yeah, any
is
incremental
theirs
costs
to
should be-
bear
right.
and not the town's to bear.
Yep.
And so whatever words we get to that result, the result should be, we're giving you the land for $1.
Yeah.
And with that, if you gotta paint your docks, or you gotta put an anchor in, or whatever you have to do, it's your expense and not ours. I think that's what you're trying to say.
That's exactly, no, that's even better way to do it. That's good. I like that, Paul. The other things I had were, I don't think they should be controversial. I just didn't think town council was strong enough in terms of requirements that didn't specifically have to do with the docks. Like, I'd like to see something in here that acknowledges the boats that are moored have to be licensed and they have to be washed in accordance with the policies. I know you're doing that anyway, but let's reflect it in here. We have whereas clauses. I'd like to have a whereas clause that acknowledges the rights of the public under Chapter 91 in this pond, and that this is not intended to undercut those rights.
Agreed.
And a few other just kind of nominal things. I wasn't sure if the insurance coverage was enough. Do you know how much insurance coverage you carry on this? This was going to ask for $1 million per occurrence, umbrella liability of $2 million.
I think we have 1 million, 1 million. I think we're pretty close to, on those numbers.
Okay.
I share that concern, though. I mean, I'm more concerned about a discharge that affects the bond.
Yes.
So I'm just not sure 1 and 2 is enough, but
But let me explain the importance of the number. There's a statute that it's a Municipal Tort Liability Act that waives immunity for communities for torts that occur up to $1 million. And so the first 1 million is what the municipality's exposure is, 1 million per event. So you need a minimum of $1 million to protect the taxpayers. Beyond that, there are all kinds of immunities that apply. So we don't have exposure.
well, they
per
apply
se.
to us. They don't apply to the yacht club.
Do not apply to the yacht club. But we're concerned with this insurance requirement that the taxpayers, again, going back to Mike's concept, you pay us $1 and then everything else is your responsibility. If somebody gets hurt there and sues you and us, we want to have insurance for the part that the statutes say we could be liable to up to $1 million.
From that standpoint, then this would be enough. I mean, if that's all we need to cover, Paul, then this is built in. So that's because it's 1 million, 2 million, the way it's set up.
Yeah, I'd like them to have insurance, though, if somebody, the dock master, my daughter from 20 years ago, if she spills gas into the farm pond and it causes, or let's not use gas, use some toxic chemical.
Shouldn't be any gas there.
There shouldn't be any gas, but the town, the taxpayer shouldn't be liable for that. Your insurance policy should be. So I'm just not sure 1 and 2 covers it.
Okay.
The additional layers are typically very inexpensive, but.
Yeah, there should be pollution insurance.
Right, it's the
It's
pollution
not-
insurance that I'm concerned
Not
about.
limited, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I had very minor other comments on this, which if somebody wants me to go over these with town council and compile everybody's comments, I can do
Yes,
that.
that would be
That'd be
wonderful.
great, thank you for volunteering. I'll give you one more, which is the definition of town property, which is critical in terms of the indemnification and insurance provision. It needs to be clear that it's not the certain town beach located on Farm Pond, it needs to be Farm Pond itself. The town property has to be
Where are we, Chuck, here?
the first whereas clause.
First whereas clause, okay, fine.
Yeah, and Farm Pond is hereafter referred to as town property. It can't be just the beach. That's just a drafting problem. It should be
So
much broader than the beach.
I have another one, if you're done.
Yep, I'm done. You,
So-
Mike got the other two I had.
So my concern is on page, these numbers are so small. It's page 3.
The pond and the reservation has the town property. Okay.
At the top of page 3, it says, licensee may bring upon the property only such equipment as is necessary to install and repair the dock, but licensee shall not store any equipment or material on the property. Well, as a sailor myself, I would think that they would want to be able to store boats and have a little shed that they could put sails in, and life preservers, and an oar or two, and so on. So there needs to be more than docks. There needs to be some kind of shed for them to
Well, it
store.
says without town's prior written consent. I mean, can we consent to what specifically it is they want to store there? You know, in other words, rather than write it into here, is it enough to say they can store the dock? And if they come to us and say, hey, we've got this shed, we say, how big is this shed? Where's it going to go? Okay, we're fine with that?
But you know that they're going to need a shed at least.
They are.
And you know they're
What
going to need
size it is?
boats too.
What size it is? Well, the boats are going to have a mooring license, right? They're going to be on the pond in some fashion?
Maybe. They may be on our property. They may be
Okay.
pulled up on the beach when there's a storm coming. I mean, I don't know all the things that they do, but I
I
know.
thought you were an experienced sailor, Paul.
I know on Nantucket, when a storm comes, people drag their boats up on the beach rather than leave them out in the water, so.
I think we would be in a situation where we would routinely have to come in and periodically either talk to the select board or to their designated agent to make sure that things run smoothly, much like we do right now. And maybe just using this license as the means to identify who that designated agent is, who has the power to both speak for the select board and for the town in these matters, might be a more streamlining approach to take rather than trying to essentially legislate
Right.
things 50 years out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think this requires select board approval. I would say the town administrator or his or her designee, because I suspect Jeannie Guthrie will be the one doing this.
Who? But she hadn't heard that, now she's going to ask for a raise.
And he just said 50 years out, Jeannie, so you got to stick around. So what is the term of this? What were we thinking about it as the term? I mean, it would be renewable, but...
It's a license, so it's indefinite in duration. It'll go on and on and on until we stop it. It's revocable on
Is that how we want to keep it?
30 days' notice. If we do a term, then it becomes a lease, then we have to do procurement, and there's all kinds of other issues. It may even require an act of the legislature. So,
We don't want to do that.
So we'll make it revocable
Right, which
and
is,
open-ended, that's fine.
which I think is what we talked about from the beginning, so.
We did, although I did have in my mind that at some point, there ought to at least be an opportunity if there's somebody else who wants to do something at that, like the ball fields want to go there. We can, change the use at some point, but I guess we can do that by terminating the,
yes.
all right.
Can I just ask that if you do include a clause for any structures other than docks, that they come and see me and the conservation agent related to sheds, buildings, or other things?
Of course, the thing, the draft already includes that they have to get all necessary permits.
Right.
Permission from us to do this does not mean that you don't go to the Conservation Commission and get approval for your wetland work.
Yeah, there's a requirement of compliance with all applicable federal, state,
Want to make sure
local
that
laws.
it's got something like that in there.
It does say that for the dock, but I'm going to have them add, or any other structure that's placed.
Right. Terrific.
It's a good call.
So,
Terrific.
I was going to say.
Why don't we give you the current version? You've heard what we're going to be asking town council to add. If any of those cause you heartburn, I bet we can get $2 a year from these guys, by the way.
Twice
Really,
as much as the community center plays.
the onus for our being here tonight is to try to make sure that we understand the timing of this. Once this is this something that requires anything other than the Board of Selectmen to vote upon?
No, a license requires no town meeting vote, so
Okay.
we can do it at our next meeting if we have
That's
it.
one reason we wanted to go that way.
Yeah, that's great. So that this means that this gives us the opportunity to now approach the other boards in order to try to put everything in place for the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
So we're very, very appreciative of you helping with the timing on this.
Yeah, and we're meeting on Saturday for the all-day advisory committee hearing, and then our next meeting after that is
28.
the 28th one. I won't be here.
Can we have it ready by then, do you think?
Yes.
For them?
We
So they
can. Is there any reason that they couldn't start their preparation now on the understanding that we're going to have this in effect? With the permission of the town administrator?
Yeah, I would so move.
Okay,
We
second.
give them permission.
We didn't bring our checkbook tonight.
That's okay.
John's got a buck.
Here's my contribution for the year.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, so I mean, if you guys need to do some, minor stuff to make it, get ready, that's fine.
Well, let's vote on it. So there was a motion.
I seconded,
seconded?
you moved, I second.
All in favor? All opposed? Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, the next item on the agenda. Yeah. Do you have any markups on the lease?
Paul gave them to me, yeah, Paul gave them to me.
Oh, you already did, okay.
Really had stuff like town manager.
My handwriting's awful. We don't need counterparts. Signing counterparts, we don't need that.
Moving right along.
It's pretty fucking standard.
At the end.
No. You see that big?
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to ratify an employment agreement with Officer Lieutenant Bento. David, do you want to key this up?
Yeah, Lieutenant Bento has a 3-year contract. It's up June 30th. The board has been negotiating a replacement contract, not a replacement contract, a new contract, beginning July 1. And Dave Bento is here, and you negotiated this in executive session, and now you're ratifying terms in an open meeting.
And Lieutenant Bento has already signed off on the agreement?
Yes.
So it's waiting our signature. Any discussion up here?
No, just I think we're lucky to have Dave Bento re-enlisting here
Yeah.
with us.
Thank you.
David, did you want to make any comments, or?
Maybe after you sign.
Yeah, Vince is a good negotiator. And I'll go to $2 a year, too. So.
Can't say anything wrong if you don't say anything.
Oh, well done. I would move to approve the police lieutenant employment contract dated, or effective July 1, 2009 with Officer David Bento.
2009?
Did I say 9?
That's
19.
10 years ago?
You're going to get a big paycheck. Yeah. Effective July 1st, 2019. Thank you, George. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Great. Now's your chance to say something.
No, I just want to take the opportunity to thank Diane and David for helping me move the process along, and thank all the board members for your approval. And it's been 29 years plus, and I look forward to continuing my career. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have.
29 years. Did you start when you were 2 years old?
Well, they're counterparts, so.
Multiple copies I can get.
Yep. One for us, one for him. Okay, and next, the very long item on the agenda tonight, the consideration of the omnibus budget, capital items, and warrant articles. Sharon or David, who wants to walk us through this? I'm guessing it's you, David?
Yeah. You have the warrant and the checklist?
I wonder if I could suggest doing things in reverse order. instead of talking about the money, talk about finalizing the warrant as to what the articles are, so we can get that done.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Then talk about the money.
Amen.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Any objection up here?
No.
Let's go.
So you have, there have been a number of small edits that I would say Scrivener corrections, that kind of thing. But there has also been talk of adding 2 additional articles that would need to have the warrant opened and add the 2 articles and then close the warrant. And if you look on the checklist sheet, it's Articles 10 and 11 that advisory was recommending that the Board of Selectmen consider for adding.
What's the second copy of Officer Bento's contract?
Oh, right here.
Thank you.
David, I didn't understand the difference between 10 and 11 and why we needed both as opposed to one.
Yeah, I can address that. At the advisory meeting last night, their preference, advisory committee's preference and their request of us is to reopen the warrant to add these 2 articles. Their preference is that the funding of the tree cleanup, I believe the figure they have in mind is $150,000. They'd prefer to do it from the stabilization fund. So if Article 10 does not, if it does pass, they will drop Article 11. If Article 10 is not passed, they will be moving the funding for the cleanup of the dead trees be funded out of free cash.
So Article 10 is a 2/3 majority vote.
Right, because this is using the general stabilization fund rather than free cash or from general operating.
And then Article 11 is just a straight majority.
Because my understanding is the general stabilization fund has approximately $725,000 in it that we've been depositing into every year, and it's to be used for emergency situations that come up, which I feel the tree situation that we have now is an emergency situation. That's why I think, and with the tight budgets and everything this year, I think it's I think their point was it's the correct use of those funds.
Yeah, and I apologize. Jeff, I didn't see you earlier. Expand on my explanation, because I suspect it's somewhat shorthand for what you're asking the select board to do.
Is this okay, Rick? I guess it's working. Just by way of background, and because there are people in town that may not know, so we typically have budgeted $50,000 a year for tree work, which in a normal year is maybe acceptable, probably somewhat late, Sean. But because of what we've seen with the drought and the gypsy moss and everything else, there's obviously a lot more tree work going on. So what happened is, in fiscal year 19 that we're in the middle of, we had $50,000, and as you signed, as did advisory, a $100,000 reserve fund transfer for fiscal year 19, and that is what we expect to spend this year on trees. So we felt strongly that $50,000 was certainly not enough for next year, given we're spending $150,000 this year. And Sean has a database of roughly 500 to 700 trees that are at risk or dead already. Probably most of them are dead already. So we felt we needed to make a strong effort to support Sean and do what will probably be not necessarily a one-time thing, but certainly a sort of a crisis situation, if you will. However, the budget's very tight this year, so what we decided to do with input from Heidi and with advisory is to put $50,000 in Sean's regular budget, which we kept that, which is flat from fiscal year 19's budget, and supplement with $150,000 from the stabilization fund, because you don't want to really use your stabilization fund for general operating expenses, obviously, but we felt this was a one-time kind of emergency situation. So we decided that would be the best vehicle, and because, as Mike Chimo pointed out earlier, it's a very tight budget year, so we felt since budgets were constrained, this would be a way to address the issue and not put extensive pressure on the financial situation. So that's what we're proposing. we were concerned that if it didn't pass as a stabilization fund withdrawal, because it's a 2/3 vote, we were going to use free cash to fund whatever the number is, Article 11. If the first Article 10 doesn't pass, and we'll say this up front, we'll explain it both on Saturday in the public hearing, we'll explain the plan in our write-up that advisory does for the annual town meeting, and we'll explain it at the annual town meeting. That we would only do one or the two. Our first choice, the stabilization. If that doesn't pass, we would then have a simple majority for the same 150,000 from free cash for this purpose.
Yeah, and Sean has reported to this board again and again, that list of trees, Eversource is taking down a lot of them, those that impact their power lines, but there's a large number that are the town's responsibility, so.
Can I just raise, it's sort of stepping backwards, but just a procedural question. So when we left here on the 28th, we had voted a particular warrant, which is not this warrant, and there's been a couple things added to it, and I understand the idea is we're going to open this and close it again, which is fine, but one reason we voted the warrant on the 28th was so it could be published and be obtained by residents ahead of Saturday's hearing. And I think this board has been criticized in the past for putting things on the warrant that weren't final language. We were making every effort this year to put final language on, but we still are in a situation where, you know, we did not publish the warrant ahead of the advisory hearing. And in fact, I got an email earlier in the week from a resident about an article that we voted off the warrant on the 28th. So, I mean, there have been different versions of the warrants floating around out there. I just think it's unfortunate, and you know, it is important to the town that people know what the advisory hearing is going to be looking at and what the actual articles are in addition to the language, and they should know it ahead of time. With that said, I understand why it was done, and I'm in favor of putting those two articles on. But you know, we had good intentions, and maybe a future board will have good intentions in the future and actually get it done.
Well, and I think because of the way we're funding it, this is a request from advisory to reopen it, and I support it. I mean, I think town's number one priority is getting the library constructed and recover as much money as we can from the people responsible for the delays. In my listing, taking care of the trees is probably number two. I try not to look out my moonroof when I'm driving anymore.
Well, you talked to me. I had a car totaled in my driveway by a tree falling on it, so.
Can I make a motion?
Fortunately, no one was in it. But
No, not
I
yet.
agree with Mike very much. I think, as I thought about this, I'm wondering, do we typically print copies of the warrant for the advisory public hearing? I'm wondering if we should consider doing that. You know,
At the
maybe-
hearing itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we do, don't we?
But he said there was another.
Because I think that will at least help if people haven't had a chance to get it in advance, if they at least have a hard copy.
These are the only two?
When this is signed tonight, I'll post it first thing tomorrow morning.
And is that a timely posting when we do that? In terms of all the deadlines that we have to meet for posting X number of days ahead of this and that? Do you think it's okay? You think it's okay?
Yeah, it's good.
All right.
I don't think we ever signed the other warrant.
We
So
never
it's-
got
it's
it.
not
The
issued.
whole-
If
Yeah, the
we
whole
had
point is
issued
we
the-
were going to get the warrant, we didn't.
This article wasn't the only thing that changed, although
Right.
I think it's
Yeah,
significant. And the unfortunate thing is it throws the numbering off for all the subsequent numbers of articles. So if you were concerned
Yeah.
with Article 23,
Which
it
is
might be
another
Article
issue we have every year, too.
Well, and I'm going to be moving to delete the CPA article because I don't think we've got an advocate for it if we're going to open it. Normally I wouldn't, and I agree with you that those are goals, but to me, the key thing is that at voting session, I think Georgia Durr affectionately called it Bloody Saturday, there needs to be printed warrant.
And there are 4 language issues that we should explain if you're going to open the warrant.
Right.
Yeah, could you tell us what they are so we have that information before we decide whether to
If you
open the
look
warrant
at
or not?
Article 3?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so Article 3 was Heidi's, the treasurer's original article was just the bond premium part, which is under number 1 of Article 3. Piece of that number 2 was included in the article for approving the trust, Affordable Housing Trust.
which is
We were
now
going to-
15.
We were going to do the rescind the 2008 annual town meeting vote of that $350,000 in the article that was
It's in Article 15. It's
forming the
not here,
trust.
Same language.
But the Housing Partnership asked if we could just clear that article out and just focus on forming the trust with no monetary transfers and no confusion of anything else.
They've emailed a red line version. Basically, Article 3, Item 2 used to be in what at that point was Article 13, now Article 15.
But it had money in it, and numbers in it.
Right.
Yes, that's right.
So now we're going to create an affordable housing trust fund, but not fund it?
Yeah, the trust was always there.
Well,
We had,
That's a mistake. The word fund should come out, if you pardon me speaking as a municipal lawyer. The word fund should come out, and it should, after the word and, it should say, and authorize the Board of Selectmen to establish a trust. Because after the statute is accepted, we actually have to create a trust that would provide for a Board of Trustees or take any other action relative thereto. So I would suggest a few wording changes there. You're not creating the fund, you're creating the trust.
I mean, can we change it now and vote on it, or is one of those things
I
where?
thought before we actually did, shouldn't we open the warrant to?
Let's go through all the things that we're talking about. Let's finish
I
up
see.
with that, and then, yeah, that's,
Because we may decide not to open the warrant based on the stuff that,
Yeah, if we're making changes, I have issues with Article 24. I was just gonna mention it advisory, to be honest with you.
I don't think we should make changes like that at this point in time,
That's what I'm
or
wondering.
false. I think we can do that by amending the language in the warrant at a later time, but I don't think we should reopen it, have it revised, and then try to post it by tomorrow morning and word things on the fly. That never works.
but I mention it because Chuck had just told me that Article 15 was one of the articles amended. So if you're going to amend Article 15 anyway,
The problem is we don't have text for that, Paul. Right? I mean, you've got an idea of what to do, but until we actually write it, we don't have language to include in this, and something's got to be posted tomorrow morning, right? And something's got to be copied and be on the table for discussion on Saturday.
Dave, finish up with the other changes, please.
So those were kind of linked together. The other two actually are regarding the revolving funds. So it's Article 5 and Article 14. So Article 5 is our routine article that's approving the revolving funds. And due to the Municipal Modernization Act 2 years ago, those are now in our bylaws. And Darren, Town Council, had added some language into the article that would allow a limit to be set on on each revolving fund, and then it is good until another limit is set, which means that you don't have to bring it in each year to set a limit. But some towns are in a routine of bringing them in every year. So at last night's discussion, it seemed like that's how they wanted it, to have the revolving funds come in each year for whatever the limit is.
The language that Darren added this year, for instance, in Article 5, was the addition of this language, with such expenditure limits to remain applicable from fiscal year to fiscal year until later amended by town meeting. I'll let Jeff weigh in on this, but basically advisory said, we don't want that rollover provision. We want to look at it anew each year. So the request from advisory was that we delete that rollover language, that it would, the expenditure limits would remain until later amended by town meeting.
And then Article 14 was creating the recreation revolving fund to be the same type of account, which would be a 53E and a half account. And that article had the same sort of language in it, where the $200,000 limit would be set in forever until voted again. So it caused a lot of questions, so Darren says if you take it out of one, you got to take it out of both.
That's correct, if I may say, Article 14 is required this year because we're switching the type of revolving fund for recreation, but in future years, the Article 14 won't exist, it'll just be another item in this Article 5 language, like the ones that are here right now.
Setting the limit for revolving.
Correct, but we wouldn't have a separate article for it, it's only because we're switching the type of funding arrangement with whatever it is, the 53E and a half, or whatever it is.
53D to 53E and a half.
So, question on this, David or Paul or whoever knows the answer to it. These expenditure limits are subject to funding, right? This is just, if you've got $75,000 in the Council on Aging programs account, they can spend $75,000, and if they've only got 65, they can only spend 65,000.
They can only set the limit based on the previous year's
But
receipts.
if they have 100, they still can only spend 75.
Okay, but I'm fine with that. It's just the question is, who set these numbers and how were they set?
I mean, each year, they, I think we verify what
Yeah.
their fund limit is, and
I give them an analysis of what their fund was at the beginning of the year, how much they had spent, and then each one of those revolving fund owners proposes their limit, and we review it.
Okay, and I'll use
And the advisory committee reviews that.
Yeah.
Okay, they do. Okay, because I'd use elder housing as an example. We know they've got a capital plan. We know they've got a really detailed program for what they want to do every year, and they have a general idea how much money they're going to get to do it. And so I don't feel like the town is fiscally at risk for that. But some of these other funds which get money in, if the incentive is to spend it all one year because next year they're going to want to spend it all, next year they're going to want to spend it all. Meanwhile, there's some big project down the road that they should be saving up for. We don't really have a way to control that. Now, maybe advisory looking at it controls that, but if there's a big project down the road, because, I don't want to pick on recreation, but let's just pick on recreation as an example. Not really picking on them. But if there's $1 million field project that we know is going to come up in 5 years, and they take in $200,000 a year, and they're authorized to spend $200,000 a year, they're going to get to year 5, and if they've spent the past $800,000, they're going to have $200 for $1 million field, and they're going to come to the town and say, hey, can the town put together a capital request for $800? We've got to fix our fields. So is advisory like looking down the road at that stuff?
Yes,
Okay.
we had that discussion last night. We said we're not, you have to live within your means in terms of the fees that you raise, that town's not funding, your use of the field.
Well, that's okay to say. That's okay to say. I'm not talking about recreation specifically, but
No,
Okay.
the only one I can't remember is reviewing this year's recycling bids, $860.
I don't think that's
we
gonna
met
break
with that, but, we review, Kitty Sturgis comes in and we review, their plan. We reviewed all of these. The recreation will be making a presentation on Saturday with slides of the projects they've identified right now.
for down the road.
Yes.
And so they've got a
for like
multi-year
10-year
plan like other people
I think
do?
it was maybe even 10 years. My only
Good, good,
concern
good,
I
good.
asked last night was, they were like a whole lot of cool projects, but I didn't see like a integrated view of, like, say, the area around the tennis courts and the skate park and the playground. I'd like to see more of an integrated view. They had specific projects, but I'd like to see sort of a more comprehensive look at Laurel Field or the downtown tennis court area. But other than that, yes, they have that.
One thing specific to recreation, the reason they wanted it to go to a revolving fund this year is that they were required to spend.
I remember, I remember
So,
that thing.
so they couldn't accumulate the funds for larger projects, so that's why they're
understand
doing
that.
this, so they can do better planning.
Yeah, and I just use them as an example because I know they talk about big numbers because they have big projects, but it's true, it's true of any of them. As long as we've got
God bless you.
a mechanism for, getting all those committees to plan down the road so that the taxpayer doesn't get stuck with a big project because the money was frittered away because people felt like they could fritter it away. I mean, I know people are trying to do the right thing for the town, but we really have to think down the road on that. We've got too many things that are going to wear out and run out and fall down.
I think it's a good point, because normally we would just blow by the revolving funds, but we could have them come in and discuss their balances, or what their
What
plans
their
are.
plan, I think we should meet with them and talk about what their long-term
I
plans
mean,
are.
like, that farm pond number looks big to me, but maybe it's not, but it looks pretty big.
So they even shows, they know, what they're paying the lifeguards. They have a budget, what they're paying the lifeguards and everything that's.
So that's operating
on that.
budget too?
Yeah,
Okay.
we looked at that budget also.
Okay.
So they can definitely review those numbers with you. And the fire and rescue, obviously, the ambulance fund is part of that, so I think that's.
Yeah, that's always been planned out pretty
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. But that's the reason why we didn't want it to be automatically renewed every year. We felt it was better that they had to come in and we would set the limit, even if it didn't change.
And the last change that I would propose if we reopen the warrant is to delete Article 16, the CPA. I think we put it in, not as a placeholder, but as a topic worthy of discussion. Given how tight money is this year, I don't think it makes sense. First of all, I'm not sure anyone on this board is willing to be an advocate for it, and it's an important topic. There are lots of trade-offs. We had a very robust, healthy, civil debate a number of years ago on this and decided not to adopt it for lots of good reasons, and it's like any other complicated project, there are advantages and disadvantages. I'm not willing to be an advocate for it. I don't know if somebody else on the board is, but if we're not, I would propose to delete the CPA article.
I think, did Sharon, you did a study, right, on what money we'd spent that could have been CPA money?
There wasn't a lot that came
There
back
was not.
to me, no.
Can you define what you're talking about? I don't
Yeah,
think anyone knows what
You were talking about the Community Preservation Act, which is a state fund that allows you to add a surcharge on the local bills for three purposes: recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing. When we looked 7 or 8 years ago, that number was 0. And the advisory committee, which I was on at the time, was opposed to it. But there are other advantages. There's matching state funds. Paul correctly pointed out that the state is taking a look at it. One of the other concerns is whether or not the state would fund it in the future. But it is a matching state fund. It's not, you can go up to 3% additional. The state historically has not funded that. They've not matched the 3%. And I'm sorry, that's a very shorthand. Any more detail? I mean, it's a.
Well, I can just explain, there's a person on the advisory who's very knowledgeable about Stephen Sy. So he pointed out that Concord just built an affordable housing project with $1 million from their fund.
Right.
But they set it up 9 years ago, so that's when the state was actually contributing a lot more. But they contributed $1 million from free cash and $1 million from their CPA fund to this affordable housing project in Concord.
You know why I'd like to keep it on here is because it provokes that discussion. And even if we ended up recommending no action and advisory ended up recommending no action, we'd be able to have some explanation of why it's worth considering down the road.
So let me add a few things here. One is that I had brought this up because at the state level, I'm working on some legislation to increase the funding for the matching piece of the CPA. We have been funding the matching piece with the surplus at the end of every year. We do a supplemental appropriation. We've been throwing some money in. But the idea is to do a permanent fix by changing the recording fees at the registry from $20 to $50. And with that increase, that would be CPA matching funds to entice people to take advantage of the state matching share. So after we had that discussion here, I thought the sense of the board was that we would look back at what the town has been spending to determine that if we had adopted the CPA, let's say 10 years ago, and we had the state matching fund helping us with what we spent, would we have saved money?
Well, that's what Sharon's saying, no. I think she says
And
she
I
looked
think
at it and the answer was no.
But I've never saw a report to that effect. You know, spreadsheet, here's the expenditures, here's what. So I don't feel like I ever got a report that I could evaluate that would determine how much this would have made an impact one way or the other. So I'm not in a position to say whether this would have been good for the town or not good for the town. Being told that it doesn't amount to much doesn't tell me whether that much is $3 million or $300,000 or $3. I really wanted to see numbers, but not having those numbers, I don't see how we can make the case for this with just an assurance that it hasn't done much. There needs to be a listing of projects that we've expended and a determination made, had we used CPA funds and the state's contribution that year was, let's say, would have been 30,000 towards that project, then you add up all the money that we would have saved, what would have been the state's contribution, and how would that have relieved the taxpayers? That's really the analysis that I thought we were going to get.
Yeah, I
We don't-
tried to, but there was no history. Nobody could share any information. The only thing I got was the memory statute and Conservation
And
Commission.
remember, statute was covered primarily by grant.
Right, by grant, so there just was
Right,
nothing.
no,
Well, I
that's-
mean,
came
didn't we
back.
go back through the warrants for the past 15 years, 10 years? That would be the way to do it, because all those expenditures would have been in the warrants, right? They would have been capital expenditures?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the idea, every building, when we rebuilt the town hall here, this was a historic building. And we used all taxpayer money. Well, if we had the Community Preservation Act for the year in which we built this building, what would have been the state matching share towards this building? And that savings to the taxpayers then gets added to like the next project that we did, and then the next project we did. So if we did like a field renovation, well, that's or an open space acquisition, didn't we acquire the Price Woodlands?
That was 20 years ago, but yes.
Yeah, but so you go through that's the process you go
I agree
through.
with you, Paul. I thought that's what was going on. I mean, you and I, we did have that discussion. I thought that's what we were going to get, and it would have helped create a case or not create a case for it.
Right.
But we don't know. But I mean, I appreciate that nobody's probably going to step forward on this unless Paul decides to raise it. But I also think having it on the warrant and the fact that it's something people are thinking about, and even being able to have the discussion that Paul just had as a presentation explaining why we're recommending no action this year, but we still think it's something that could benefit the town. I think it's good to have that discussion, put it out there. I don't think it hurts anything. I know there are going to be people who stand up on Saturday and speak against it. It may end up taking a long time, but
I just don't like having articles that aren't ready for prime time. I don't think we are prepared to make a serious advocacy for this. So using a warrant article as an educational piece, I just don't support that. You know, we can talk about it here, but there's enough important warrants. I don't think this warrant article without a serious proponent stands a chance in hell of getting approved. I think it's a waste of time, but that's only one person's view.
I think if we're going to reopen the warrant this late, it should be for some specific things, as Mike was saying, like Articles 10 and 11. We voted already to include this on the warrant, so I don't think when we reopen it to vote to take it off. I think it can easily be recommended as no action, but I don't think we need to take it off.
As long as it doesn't put a stink about it. I mean, there is something about when something gets voted down by a town meeting time and time again, it just has less and less chance of coming up. You know what I mean? Will it hurt any kind of future vote for a CPA? I understand the dialogue, I definitely do, but you know, you hear it, people will ask questions. We voted on this 3 times, why are we doing it again? You know, and maybe it could hurt it in the long run.
Okay, well, I think it's an open issue.
it's not a tax. I mean, it's not a year to propose a tax increase either. So
Right.
maybe that's that, and along with Eric's rationale, maybe that's a reason enough to take it off, even if we think it's a good one. I think it's a shame. I think we were positioned to at least know what to talk about here, but I don't think we got follow through, and we didn't get the information we were looking for.
Can I move to open the warrant?
Yeah, I think that's the first step.
A second.
All in favor of opening the warrant? Great. I would move to add to the warrant Article 3, the new Section 2, to delete the language from Article 5 and Article
14.
14. Sorry, let me...
The new Article 14.
The language which was added by Darren Klein, with such expenditure limits to remain applicable from fiscal year to fiscal year until later amended by town meeting. I would move that language be deleted from both Article 5 and Article
14.
What's currently Article 14 in
Just
the
call it
in
the
the current
recreation
draft.
revolving fund
Yeah.
article.
I would also move to add to the warrant the new transfer from stabilization funds for tree cleanup, Article 10, and Article 11, the tree cleanup article from free cash.
Second.
And I think that's it. David, did I miss anything?
That's everything I had.
Okay, do I have a second? Yes?
Second.
All in favor of that motion? Terrific.
Did you just?
Move to close the warrant.
Good idea.
Second.
All in favor of closing the warrant?
I just had a point of comment, because we brought up everything else or whatever. There are just, there's issues with Article 24, it will not put us in compliance with the, with our gifties permit.
So I think we can raise those.
Advisory. I'll raise that
I
advisory.
think we can raise them at advisory
Yep.
and have them marked up. for
Did AECom write
town
this?
meeting.
No.
Okay.
And the article,
AECom had some comments
Yeah.
that I forwarded to Darren, and I haven't got an answer.
and the article that I forgot to include was, I would move to delete Article 16, the CPA article.
I would second that.
To remove Article 16.
Wait, did we just close the
just
warrant?
We just closed it, so
He didn't close
I
it.
didn't vote.
We didn't vote on it yet.
I didn't vote.
Eric said we did, Eric
I had a point
stopped.
to-
before we vote on closing the article, the warrant, I would move that we delete Article 16, the CPA, the Select Board article. Is there a second?
I seconded that.
Great. All in favor of deleting Article 16 from the warrant? Great. Now, we have a pending motion on closing the warrant. Any comment, discussion? All in favor of?
Just before we vote,
Yeah.
do we have everything?
Are we done?
Let's take a moment, just make sure.
Jeannie, are we done?
David, are we done?
Yeah, we already made the changes.
I was saying, I know you have, you
Did-
print,
Jeff, are we done?
Well, so, did any of the numbers, I think a couple of the numbers may have changed in the warrant article number 9, the capital numbers, the language didn't change.
Yeah, I think in not,
Not
like in
permissible
those
to
kind of
change?
numbers, and not,
But those are below the line, so they're not binding.
Okay.
actually,
We don't need to change the numbers.
okay.
Yeah.
So we ready to vote on the motion to close the warrant? All in favor? Terrific.
Can you, can I ask that you mark those, that they're,
Yep.
they're no good?
Oh.
So that you don't,
start looking at them on.
yeah, I just mixed them up, but, and pass these down.
Oh, okay. These are the ones with Article 16 removed?
Yes.
Okay. These are the new warrants without Article 16.
They're already ready?
They're mind readers down.
David,
Why?
I've started the additions and the deletions.
They knew how we were going to vote before we voted.
Is that what you're looking for? Just so we're on the same page?
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, that would be good.
So is this ready to be signed?
There's the version without CPA
Yeah.
and with CPA?
Does it have 10 and 11 in here?
Here's the checklist.
This one says without CPA.
New checklist.
So all we have to do is sign this?
You just voted it without the CPA article, correct?
Yes.
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 So we can sign this, all the other changes have been already made.
Yes.
Even to number 2 and Article 3.
To Jeannie and Diane.
2 has the language, Article 3, Section 2 is in. Darren's new language in Article 5 and Article 14 have been deleted, where you had the rollover until amended by the
And
state.
Article 16 is deleted.
Yep.
So it's
Great.
good.
So is there
We can-
one original we're signing? Are we signing a
Do you
lot
have
of
the
them?
one original you want us to sign, Diane?
You can sign any
You
one
can
of
sign
those.
that one,
Here,
doesn't
no.
matter.
You can use this one, I'll
Okay.
start. We'll pass it down.
We can toss this one, the old one,
So which one do you want
Here.
us to sign?
Take one more of these.
What's the sense of the board? I would love to vote on as many of the warrants
Yep.
as we can. I think a lot of them are fairly straightforward,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's helpful for advisory at the voting session to know
Where we stand.
where we stand. I would not include the final budget, because I think that keeps
Yeah,
moving.
and I don't think we should vote on budget until Saturday, because there's a lot of moving parts.
Right.
Right, Sharon, it's still changing? Or do you think the one you have
We're pretty
tonight?
close, yeah, I don't think it's gonna change by much. I think we're done. We're done.
Well, don't we want to, we never voted on the budgets that report to the Board of Selectmen?
Right.
We said we were going to defer on that,
Yeah.
and shouldn't we vote on that for the advisory?
Do we have final numbers?
Yeah, I agree with
you're
that
right.
Do we
completely.
have final numbers on those?
And those are the only ones we would vote on anyway.
Can I make a proposal on the warrant voting? We're going to do that tonight?
Yeah.
Can I make a proposal that the way we do that is anybody who would not vote in favor of something, call it out so that we have a vote or a discussion only on the ones where we don't have a unanimous.
That's a good idea.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think these are relatively,
I copied that from advisory, by the way. That's how they do the budget. Or
Yeah.
did the budget.
and why don't I start off, there's only one article that I would take out of order, which is the designation of the treasurer as an appointed officer, Article 21. That's the only one I would not, that I would like to, that I would not approve. Who wants to go next?
I'm just looking through them.
I'm just going
I mean, I
for-
still got my issues with Article 24, like, so I don't know where to write, to what extent I can edit that in with advisory. 'Cause I don't have specific language for it or anything like that, and has some common errors in it.
I'd like to,
So let's hold Article 24 for further discussion.
I'd like to hold 26, 27, and 28. All three citizens petitions to discuss.
26, 27, and 28.
Yep.
Isn't that 27, 22? Or that's because, no, that's right. we
There's a new
changed
checklist
it,
that
yeah,
was
we-
handed down.
I didn't get the new checklist.
Did you? Paul stole them all.
I have them all here, sorry. You made it as far as.
Yeah, okay, I would hold 26, 27, 28
Yeah,
also.
I agree with that as well.
So can I move that we support all articles other than those that we just identified as being on hold?
I would second that, and that would be Articles 21, 24, 26, 27, and 28. All others would be approved.
Or supported.
Or supported.
Supported, yeah.
Right, I'm sorry, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Great. Let's take them in order. Article 21, I suspect this may be a vote of 4-1, but I continue to think there are good rationales for having elected officers and officials. I recognize that I think I'm probably a minority of one, at least on this board.
So why the treasurer and not the collector? Is Corey here or not? Is it because that's more administrative and that was more policy-oriented? Because, some people combine treasurer collectors, some people appoint both, but to have one elected and one appointed, just seems unusual.
I'm trying to remember the rationale. Jeff, do you remember why the designation of an elected official as an appointed one is limited to the treasurer?
Yeah, I don't know why that is either, because technically the Board of Health has a budget and they're elected also. They're not town employees, but they control the town budget and they hire and fire people.
Heidi, do you remember the rationale?
No, I just told it was some history, and this is the reason why they were going to go.
There's an explanation that Corey posted
Right.
on Nextdoor Sherborn.
And I think it
Today.
has a lot to do with fiscal responsibility and
Article 22 is making it appointed though, so it may just be as simple as that.
it's 21 now.
No, 21 is the HR director.
No,
No, there's a
it's
new
changed
list.
because we took
list.
16 out.
The CPA is dead to
See,
Sherburne.
when you're up at this table, you gotta really be quick, you gotta keep up.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on town meetings. I've had personal interactions with this, My mother was the treasurer, she actually was the collector later on there, and I had other issues before that, historic issues. But nonetheless, I think it's something that the governance committee did a fair amount of work. There are a lot of volunteers there. I have a lot of faith in that governance committee that they vetted it well. I'm going to vote for it to keep it on discussion. Not sure how I'm going to vote in town meeting, but I think it's worth moving forward in discussion and keep it in front of advisory, have the dialogue on town meeting floor.
Right. And I can count votes at this table, so I would short circuit the discussion by me making a motion that I suspect will not get seconded to not support Article 21. Is there a second? Somebody want?
I'll make a motion to support Article 21.
Second.
Yeah, and I'll kudos, echo the kudos to the Governance Task Force 2 committee. It was a terrific committee. They did a lot of work. Their work was almost as good as the first Governance Task Force committee, but not quite. Okay, all in favor of supporting Article 21? All opposed? 4-1. And I would ask that this committee not stand up and identify themselves as an individual speaker. I will not do that on this article. I just think at town meeting, we take a vote as a board, and I would ask that we all support the majority of the board.
I agree.
No minority opinion?
Yeah, that's the way we did when I was on advisory, and I thought it was a good policy. Okay, the next one was Article 24.
It's just a dialogue with it, just because it's an error that's being done all over the place. That's why I was curious if AECom had something to do drafting with it, because I sat down and talked to them. That's the illicit discharge in the stormwater bylaw.
Actually, Article 23 now.
So I have a proposal for you.
I meant to vote on 23. I wanted to hold on 23 and we all voted.
That's okay, we knew what you meant.
Yeah, because it was the old 24.
Are you talking about the
5 minutes ago?
Illicit discharges,
I
yeah.
have a suggestion for you, Eric, which is to vote to support the article with appropriate amendments.
To make that motion.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm going to do. And just, if you want to know technically, it references this Mass DEP Stormwater Handbook, which is not as strict as the NIPD's MS4 permit. It's supposed to change it, but DEP has not done it yet, and it still essentially has got more loose treatment requirements than the actual NIPD's permit, so.
So I mean, to translate that, right, so that means if we're going to stay in compliance with the NIPD's permit, we can't just follow the state's stormwater manual. And so it should reference that permit in here.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
And Sean has something to say.
There was a couple other amendments that AECom had that they wished to add, and I forwarded those on, and we haven't heard back from council.
Okay.
All right, so
I don't
it
know
might
if
get
those can be
amended.
incorporated.
So that's why my suggestion is my motion would be to support this article with appropriate amendments to come from town council, Sean, Eric, Mike, if you want to have some.
I'll move to support this article with technical and appropriate amendments at advisory.
Second.
Second, Paul seconds.
All in favor?
Okay.
Perfect.
I think if you cause the advisory vote to reflect that would be helpful too, because then when we do the write-up of the warrant, we can put in the write-up, because basically we're going to have to change the vote at town meeting to
Right.
supplement it. So we could put Eric's point in our write-up, advisory, here's your opinion first, and you basically take the swing vote.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think, given the numbering issue, I don't think Article 24 was the one that Eric intended. I would move that we support Article 24 as drafted.
Second.
All in favor? Terrific. The next article is
26.
26, thanks. This is the Sustainability Coordinator. It is a citizen's petition.
I just wanted to have a discussion on this because I think we've mentioned it before, limiting it to just environmental issues when this position, I think it's a great idea to have somebody writing grants, and especially if it's something that's going to pay for itself, but it should be town-wide for the planning board, for Sean's department, for the fire department, whoever's looking for grants. If we have a town-wide grant writer rather than specific to a sustainability coordinator, I think that could be a better use of our resources.
Yeah, I made that suggestion last night. I'm torn. This is a citizen's petition, but if they have 19 and a half hours budgeted and they have 2 hours where they can help with a library grant, Aaron does a great job with grants, but
So
if we have a grant writer.
Why don't we do the same thing, to move support, provided that certain amendments be made to the text?
Can I comment on that too? Is
No.
it time for comment?
Yes, sir.
This votes to direct the select board to create the position. I would think we should ask them to say, authorize the select board to create the position. I mean, we may have budget issues, or we may have another way to take care of grant duties and decide that it's not the right time to create a new position.
This article, and I confirmed it with Darren again today, it can't force you to do anything. It can't force you to create the position or hire for the position. So you will always be the authority on what you want to create, what you want in the job description.
Then it should definitely say authorized, because the town meeting's going to think they're voting to direct.
But does it have to be a sustainability, like, is that what we would have to call it, or?
No.
Okay.
No, there can be a motion made under this article by the advisory committee or by the citizens that would address all these issues. And can be one from the board if we want to.
And specifying the number of hours or the hourly rate, it's not, it will be what it,
I would add is I'm in favor of limiting it to sustainability only. And there's two reasons for that. One is I think it looks great for the town and PR to say a sustainability coordinator. If we say we have a grant writer, I don't think it has the same cachet. If we're doing LEED certification or if we're doing any kind of other things, and we're trying to be a green town, I think there's a benefit to having the title sustainability coordinator. I think they can help in other grants, but I also think there should be enough work for sustainability work.
There may or may not be, but my concern is this article says they are directed to apply for grants that are limited to, I need to find my prior draft, energy conservation upgrades. I have no problem with the title. What I don't like is the constraint that that's all that they can do.
But it does apply to all departments, to George's earlier point.
Well, I see that.
It applies to all departments.
But it says, shall assist the community maintenance and development department and town planner in any implementation of energy conservation measures. What if he wants to do something?
I think it's broader than that.
Well, no, that's what it says.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
So I think,
Because we're putting 3 roofs on the schools in the
Right.
next 5 years.
I'd rather have it be,
They will have huge sustainability components, both in terms, sustainability includes the recycling of materials you take away from the site, in addition to the new materials you put in.
I just think we should, I would support something that's broader than sustainability coordinator, but I think this is too limited.
So why don't we say that we do not support it at this time unless there are material changes made in.
Second.
Boy, I like the idea. I think the town has done a terrific job with grant writing already. Aaron does a great job with it. Michael Lesser got some clean energy grants that he did it. Sean has. I mean, we've done a good job. It doesn't mean we can't do better. The fact that that's the way we've done it in the past doesn't mean we can do it, have to continue doing it that way. I actually support the citizens petition. I just wouldn't limit it to only green energy sustainability grant writing.
The funny thing is, they came in here and they asked us to put an article on and draft it and put it on the warrant, and we said, no, you guys have to go get a citizens petition. And then they drafted what they thought was the right thing and got a citizens petition. And now we're telling them, we don't like your language.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't like the language.
Well said, Michael.
So what, on this article, I'm trying to think of a motion that would get a consensus. What if the motion is to defer a decision on this article until we have opportunity to work with the citizens further on this?
Second. I'll second anything at 10.
We're noticing a pattern here.
Advisory is in favor of this because it pays back. And because we have some projects to pay, we think there's financial benefits to this. And we don't want to.
I understand that, but I think it could be broader and there could be even more. It could pay back even more. That's my point.
Well, I think that's true, but anything we do will be better than delaying and not deciding now.
No, advisory said very clearly they believe the ROI numbers on this.
I do too, but I think it could be higher.
I'm not saying to defer it to another year. I'm saying defer it until we have a chance to meet, maybe invite them in. Are they going to be at the hearing on?
They're presenting, they have a good presentation.
So maybe we can work with them a little bit at that
They probably need
Saturday
to
session.
What they needed. They needed someone to help with the language, from my point. They probably needed, they were citizens, so they didn't have access to town council.
I wonder if G, which says he or she shall perform all other related duties as required, could just cover all the other stuff we think they're going to do.
Because, as you said, I mean, I think if it's under our direction to appoint a sustainability coordinator we can also modify this job description, like you said, with that last line, there's room for interpretation on that.
Yeah, and I have no problems with these being the priority grant applications, but if they have available bandwidth, I don't want somebody pointing to this article and saying, oh, I can't do it, I'm not
You
authorized.
just have to say clause G. Clause G gets you there.
Yeah.
They have benchmark towns that have, I forget the number, 65 towns that have sustainable.
Well, I don't think anybody's saying that that's not a good idea.
Oh, no, I don't
What
think it's
they're
a
saying
bad
is
idea at all. I
It should be a broader portfolio than just sustainability.
Sean?
What's up? Well, I was gonna make a similar point. You want all those things, you just don't ever want to pigeonhole yourself. You stare at a grant and go, I just can't. It should. It checks all the boxes, except I can't call it sustainability, so I'm not.
Right, it's not in A through F.
Right.
And I'm not comfortable adding it as G.
Write it because the sustainability coordinator can't write it.
I think G, under G, they can do that.
I think G, they could do it, that's true. Good catch on that.
Yeah.
I think I can support it with G in there.
So then the motion is to support it with amendments? So we got three choices. We can support it with amendments, we can oppose it for the time being unless it's amended, or number three, we can say we're going to defer making a decision as to whether or not we
Let's do
support it.
three.
Yeah. And I'd like to
To see their
suggest to them-
presentation on-
I'd like to suggest them at the voting session that they expand it. So that if there's bandwidth, they can do other grants. And not
Okay.
rely on that broad language.
So
in
we'll
section-
vote on it on Saturday then.
Section G that Mike likes so much.
All right,
So you're gonna defer.
I seconded Paul's third motion.
So we're gonna defer
There's three
to
motions on
Saturday
the floor.
this.
We're going to defer it until,
I've actually seconded all three of them, but the one I want you to vote on is the third one.
I know you did
So,
second all.
so vote to defer it to Saturday.
Yes.
right,
Okay.
after discussions and suggestions with the citizens who drafted this petition, as Mike quite correctly points out. All in favor of that motion? Terrific.
You got the unanimous vote.
On 27 and 28, I'm gonna group those two together because I don't support either one of these because I think it limits the role of advisory and their flexibility, and I don't think we need to do that. I think advisory needs the ultimate flexibility as we see with the changing budget right up until town meeting, and I don't see the need to put these in there.
And last night's advisory meeting, one member of the advisory committee pointed out very persuasively to me, it's Mr. Waldron, that this ties the hands of the capital budget committee in terms of how they, I had not fully appreciated that, so I agree with you.
In terms of how they put things on the warrant?
No, in terms of advisory voted, I think unanimously,
Both of them down.
down.
Yeah.
Now with, on 27 is probably the one you're talking about, the bundling of the capital projects there.
Yeah.
To be honest, in some ways, so I do like the way they look for transparency and they actually make a tax impact on to quantify it. Because in some ways, Sherborn's a little odd, the way the bonding or whatever it is, the capital projects need that 2.5 exemption. But what ties their hands is the fact that they have to bundle them, the initial parts of it.
50K is really a problem.
Yeah.
And I think, and the other part of it is, I think Carol had a problem with the part about financial disclosure at the polls.
Section 6.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's not even.
Yeah, I have a legal problem with that.
Yeah,
does.
Carol said the same thing. That it was. So I'm going to make a motion to not support Article 27.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Is the 28 also?
And I'll make a motion not to support Article 28.
Second.
All in
I'm
favor?
just curious about 28. So, I mean, is it basically asking that any time, be it something that changes or whatever else, that liability goes up, that takes special action to actually go with the cap? That one's, like I said, I like some of that transparency of 27, but 28, that's tough.
Jeff, do you want to explain why advisory voted against this article unanimously?
I can explain, because Michael did a big presentation.
It's going to be.
So, when we created the program, I think it was 1998, the state required by 30 years, 2028, that you were fully funded. This is the pension funding. At the time, we had a $1.5 million gap between what the actuarial said we owed and what we had funded. So since that time, we've followed the state pension board tells us how much to fund each year, and it's based on two primary assumptions. One is the actuarial assumption about the lives of people that are in the plan, and the other is the reinvestment rate, or what they're earning on the funds. So we followed that every year. We're now at 10.7 million gap. So we have a bigger gap, but we did everything they told us to do. Michael feels strongly that we shouldn't allow that to increase. So his whole article is to, if it ever gets to a point where it's more than 10.7, we should contribute more that year than the state tells us to contribute, so that we don't go above 10.7. That's the concept that
What year were we, 1.5?
I don't know exactly, but it was late 90s, 98, I believe it was. Late 90s, yeah.
1.5 to 10.
Yeah, in that range. But you see, the problem I have with this, having worked at Aetna, is that a lot of the changes due to actuarials, it's because we're living longer. So all the liability before didn't necessarily change, and it wasn't the investment decisions. I think it's because people are living longer, so those people that are collecting the pension are collecting for a much longer time now. So the problem we have with setting a fixed cap at 10.7, he wants to fix it at today's value, is that the state could all of a sudden have a different actuarial assumption, and we have a much bigger liability because they predict people are living a lot longer going forward. And then we would, if this was really adopted, we would have to fund that year all of a sudden a large amount if there was a big delta that year. So he's trying to.
Is there any other community in the state that's done what Michael
So
wants to
he's
do?
got a graph he'll show you. We are the low. He just did the towns, because there's obviously towns like Springfield and Brockton, I think they're way behind. But he just did the 495 area, I think, and he had however many towns. We're the next to last one. We're currently funded at around 44% of our pension liability.
But has any other town adopted something like this?
Oh, I don't know of anyone.
That sets
Yeah,
a limit on it.
I don't know.
And the reason I ask that is because when there are legislative fixes and things like that, you don't want to be the one guy who
Yes.
says, but wait, I already paid all that,
Yes.
and now the legislature's fixing it for everybody else. So I wouldn't want to approve this
That's
unless we had a peer group.
Yes. He will show you the range. I mean, Wellesley's around 80%, we're around 44%, so.
Wellesley was 100.
Wellesley was 100, yes, so the actuarials did them in a little bit too, but I don't think you also, in any legislative thing, you want to fix things. You don't want to be a fixed, you can make it be, we could maybe have a goal of being, 70% or something, but to make it a fixed dollar amount seems to be
That's
restrictive
tough.
to me also. So we voted unanimously not to support this also.
Well, I would just add to that, in my opinion, Section 10 here is inconsistent with state law. Cannot be adopted by the town. You can't have the local appropriating authority by two-thirds vote seeking voter approval at a regular or special election to suspend the schedule. The only things that can go on the ballot are those things that are authorized by state law. There are non-binding public opinion referenda questions we can put on. There's Prop 2.5 questions we can put on. There are questions that we're authorized to put on. This would require an act of the legislature to do it. Absent the act of the legislature, in my opinion, Section 10 is inconsistent with state law and cannot be adopted by the town.
Okay. I already made a motion, right?
Also, how could you vote on an expenditure for the following fiscal year? I don't know if you could do that either. It's a budget issue, right?
We haven't voted yet.
All right, so
Any other discussion up here? All in favor of the motion?
all right, great, we're done with that.
Terrific. Select the budgets.
Yes.
The update on the budgets. Karen, are you going to walk us through this, or is David?
Well, if you look at the very first page,
Of which one? I got two different.
okay, the one that has the staple. And if you look, the bottom half is all the departments that fall under the select board. And you'll see that the 2% COLA and the department request is flat for everybody, because any changes that happen during the course of the budget year, for example, if there were reclassifications or hours were increased in agreement with the personnel board, we decided to move the the budget up so that it, when we increased by 2%, we were taking into consideration those changes. And also the fact that FY '19 had 280 hours and FY '20 has 2,096 hours, so that's that whole leap year thing. So, no issues on comp, but the issue, we do have some issues.
2%.
The advisory projection, what are you looking at right now?
I don't know, I've got the one with the staple, and I'm looking at the first
Yeah,
page.
yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
Where's the 2% ones?
Oh, okay, so column H, that represents,
Okay,
okay, that represents the 2% COLA that advisory had projected.
okay,
And then the next column is what the department requested, and you'll see that everything matches up.
okay.
But that's 2%, that's not 2% COLA, it's 2.2%,
Right.
or some
And-
other number.
Exactly, and any other compensation adjustments that were approved by the Personnel Board for hours or adjustments.
So
to
let me just
rates.
make a comment about this compensation issue. Because today I was looking at proposed legislation, going through stacks of proposed bills and what the general court should be doing with them. And there was a proposed bill to go to bi-monthly paychecks for municipalities. That's once on the 15th and once on the 1st of every month. That's when the paychecks occur. So there's no issue of stray days and so on. And the determination was that there already is a statute in the books that allows a Board of Selectmen to implement that. And I was thinking, if there already is a statute, do we know, are we aware of the fact that we can go to bi-monthly paychecks and solve this problem once and for all, as opposed to this weekly system where some years you have 52 weeks, sometimes you have 53 weeks, and then you have these odd days and all that kind of stuff. The bi-monthly system is that you would have 24 paychecks per year.
Paul, I think what we talked about at the last meeting was that after this budget, we didn't want to change this budget year.
Yes, I understand.
So I think this discussion at 10 o'clock at night, we should talk about those changes after we're through this budget.
I just want to be sure everybody knows that that option is out
Sometime
there.
in late May or early June.
Yeah.
But I think it is an important discussion, and I appreciate that, Paul. And
What's the date of your
I think
last
we
meeting?
really should address it before next year's budget season. So I think right after town meeting, before the May election, we should discuss this.
I agree with your timing.
You could also open it up just to volunteers at first to make sure it's working and then require it later.
Yeah, there's a variety of ways to implement. I just wanted to bring to your attention that we already have the power to address this issue if we want to address it.
David, quick question on the selectmen expenses. A big chunk of that, somebody at advisory last night had dinged us, and my recollection was there was a transfer of IT money
Yeah,
into our account.
we had actually reduced like 10 grand or
Yep.
something.
Yeah, it was
$10,000.
25,000 that was transferred from town buildings
Town buildings,
to
technology.
the select board.
That's
budget.
Because the town buildings is down.
And then we reduced
More than-
that.
I just want to make that point before the Saturday.
I know, I understood that, yes.
Okay, good.
Can we do the same thing with this that we did with the warrant articles, where we say if there's any budgets we want to hold and discuss further, let's do that, or we can vote to support the budgets as they're presented?
Well, the question I would have is the total right in order to balance the budget? Or is there some cuts that have to be made? So what I'm missing from this is sort of the overall picture. Do these charts indicate a balanced budget, or are we off? by some-
What do you mean by a balanced budget?
To get us below $20 tax rate?
Absolutely not.
1999.
Nope.
If you look at this last page, no.
We are at $20.28.
It's this column
for
right
the-
here.
But we
Other
really
than the
won't
last
know
page.
until September. when all the,
But we'll know free cash will be certified the end of March also.
Yeah.
But there's really no
You
way.
you never know until the actual growth number comes in.
Right, exactly,
And the
and that's-
revenue number comes in.
The problem
So this
is-
is a
This is
projection
a
of what the
projection.
tax rate's gonna be.
based on the property valuations going down $8 million and limited growth.
Growth number, last year, the growth number in fiscal year 19 was $258,000. This year, it's 140 or 160.
That's
something.
Wendy's projection.
Half.
Yes.
Half of
What's
the
that
growth.
based on? That's what I can't understand. What is that based on? That's people adding additions to their house?
Well, no, it also
New
includes
homes.
Ben Stevens building houses on Green Lane.
But it's how many $1,000?
So the increase this year, how much is in that? I can't remember, it's
It was
180 or
What?
160.
So that's what I'm saying,
little.
$160,000 is like,
Yes.
5 decks in this town. I mean, how can that possibly?
No,
That's the tax
160
rate.
more in tax rate.
That's the tax
Not
rate.
100.
The tax.
That's the tax
Yes.
I
revenue.
thought you said that was the base.
No.
No,
No, that's the
Oh,
growth.
okay.
That's
the
the
growth.
new
But-
tax revenue.
Thank you.
That's the growth in taxes, but
That's a lot
last year,
better.
last year was 258,000
In growth.
of growth in
Okay.
taxes. In addition to, there's two components. One is the valuation of existing real estate, which people can apply for abatement. So she reduced the denominator of our, our tax rate is based on the cost divided by the tax base in town. She reduced that by, what was it, 5
8
million?
million.
8 million.
8 million.
First she
You can't
said,
apply for
First it was
abatement
15
Each
million.
year, though. It's not, the
Well,
effect of the
she's-
abatement is
it's
not
for the
gonna take-
2020 year,
Yeah, this is a fiscal 2020.
2020.
That's what I'm saying. When's the abatement going to take effect? It's going to take effect.
after the tax rate's set, right? Isn't
I
it?
know, that's what,
That's right.
I
Yeah.
pushed back on this, and you pushed back on this, Michael did at the last meeting, I know, the last
And
advice.
and in emails too, but it's.
I know, but
no
so,
avail.
this is what we got from Wendy, I don't know that we,
So if the revenue number ends up coming in higher, this 2028 is gonna be
so
lower.
The answer Steve gave me was that as advisory, you guys don't feel comfortable second guessing.
Wendy.
Wendy, and I mean,
Yeah.
you want to stay in your lane. I
Yes.
kind of get that. But on the other hand,
it influences
pretty
all
big
the
issue for the
decisions.
town.
So on the positive side, this is the leanest, I've been on advisory 6 years, this is the leanest increase in budgets we've ever had. Our guidance was the 2% COLA that was the Personnel Board recommendation, and flat expenses, completely flat, and we're very, very close to that. The school department, which is Pine Hill and regional schools combined, is around $17 million budget. They are up, I think, $60,000 out of $17 million.
good.
So, they
really.
just, Andy Keogh and Don Fator and the crew, they just made significant changes in the last 2 weeks for us to help us get it down further. So,
That's what, 70% of the total budget?
in that range, yes.
Yeah.
And so, the budget makers have done a phenomenal job in restraining their growth, and we have also turned down some things that probably made sense, but we didn't feel we could afford. So the problem with the growth number is that it could not, maybe just as bad next year.
Well, I think
That's the
with
concern.
that though, I think next year you're gonna have some bigger, like I know this year the 59 North Main isn't gonna be coming on in the fields.
So Mary Wolf has estimated those two as combined adding $60,000 to the tax base.
I think that's higher than that.
I
think
don't
I
know.
told her,
I
I told her I thought she was wrong.
I
so.
didn't estimate it, but it's probably not as big of a windfall as I thought it would be.
Dan North Main's what, 16 units?
12.
Oh, 12, okay.
That's 12.
That's
and
12,
How
and I
many
think
is
it's
the, how many
around
is the fields?
28.
32?
32.
But they're doing that in
I
phases,
thought it was
right?
16.
16 units? I thought it was 12 units.
What?
Yeah,
59 North
59
Main.
North Main.
12.
And the other one is 32.
Talk to the building
Yeah.
inspector.
So 12 and 32?
I'm saying
But
12
the
units.
32 are not gonna come on next year. They're building that in phases, correct,
They
Chris?
have 3 buildings permitted now, and then it's gonna be building by building as they go along.
Yep.
John, you've been waiting patiently.
One other explanation I got, because I think me and Mike were thinking the same thing, on an off year on the assessment, one of the former board of assessors did correct me that every year there's a portion of the town they call a neighborhood assessment does get reassessed. It used to be the third, every fifth year they reassess the whole town.
Right.
And certify it, but every year they reassess something. So there is neighborhoods that will get a new assessment this year.
Right.
And that's what they're estimating is gonna come down.
So a fifth of our town is going to come down $8 million altogether? That seems like a lot.
Well, I know the farm pond.
I think it sounds high, too.
Farm area, which Sean knows way more than I do, but I'm not sure that that's the area they're picked, but those houses above 1 million are the ones that are selling well below.
What I've seen, and I had a
Asking price.
discussion with Mary Ann Clancy about it yesterday, actually, was anything over 1.5 is selling well below assessment. And you can look it up on sales, and that's just, there's not a huge market for homes over 1.5 million in Sherborn.
So Sharon, I have a quick question.
Could be less of a market.
With you
where
highlighted
tax
in
rate
yellow
goes up.
here for required cuts for a flat tax rate, that's not to bring it to 1999, is it? That's to bring it to 1962? You gotta cut 370,800, bring it to what?
It's to bring it to 1999. I should have changed that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's this, what page is this on?
Yeah, so we'd need additional
The
cuts of
last page of the
370.
stapled
Yeah.
pack.
Yeah.
I think the budget makers have really done a lot this year. I think advisory's been working, I know they've been working very hard at this. I would make a motion to support all the budgets under the Board of Selectmen. Or should we wait for Paul to come back?
Yeah. While we're waiting for Paul.
Just by reference, the advisory is not proposing holding on any line items in the operating budget.
So this is going to be a quick meeting on Saturday. We should be done by what, noon?
I don't know. I don't know.
That's funny. If you keep seconding at the pace that you're going.
We posted it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Both, okay.
Too bad.
Sure.
The one line item I'd like to talk about is CM&D, because I know we've been historically underfunding maintenance. Sean, are there pieces, you live with this budget, or is there,
I'm pretty concerned. We're committed in several different areas for long-term commitments that we made several years ago. We're not 100% sure. I've made that clear. And I'm not talking discretionary spending. Road materials look like they're up, but they're, without any capital, which we've had, they're $200,000 a year down. And the MS4 permit, we don't know what that's gonna cost this coming year. There's several different things up in the air that nobody knows.
so are we setting ourselves up for a likely reserve fund transfer?
Yes.
Sean, what specifically did they cut from the request?
What's that?
What specifically did they cut from the request?
There was a consulting,
The original budget had 100,000 for trees, so we took that,
Yeah.
and that's why we're doing the
That out, yeah.
stabilization fund. so
Right, but it's
that-
still 50 down.
Correct.
just recently, they,
And you kept the reserve fund at 300,000, I
Yes,
see,
we
which
did.
is
We
good.
brought it back up.
Yeah, I wish
Yep.
it was higher, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
George. Just because with trees, you gotta,
Well, with the trees, if we're designating that 150, hopefully that, this year we spent 100 out of the reserve fund for that, but we're giving the 150 from the stabilization fund.
And left 50 in his.
Right, so he's got 200 for trees for next
But
year.
it's almost
keep
like
in
snow
mind,
and ice.
the 100 that went into the reserve fund came out of the buildings capital.
Yes.
So you took a really short budget that's not covered by much capital, and you're short in capital versus back at Wednesday.
Yeah, the reduction from 400 to 300,000 on building, that's way, way below what Inside had been.
We're gonna go for a reserve fund this year to cover the building
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah.
Just to cover the electricity and gas, and some of the repairs, but it's being covered by capital.
I think unfortunately, we have to make those hard decisions in a year like this, when we are seeing a tax rate going from 1962 to 2028. I mean, without
It's a hard, it's a
Without
very
any
hard
additional
year.
revenue, you've got to cut. And unfortunately for Sean, I think it hits his budget.
It's a hard year, though, because in town buildings, we also cut his operating budget, so he doesn't have much in the way of maintenance in town buildings. And then they cut further the capital budget. You see, in the past, in roads also, we improved, I think it was around 450,000 2 years ago, in addition to chapter, whatever it is, 80
90.
funds, or chapter
90.
80 funds. So the money he spent on roads last year was way more than his operating budget because we had capital work and operating work to fund it. So we don't have any
That was
capital
something
for
that we pushed hard
roads.
for.
And so in town buildings, we've reduced both the operating maintenance and the capital amount. And the problem with reducing the maintenance, which he ran into at the police station, is that they're not the same work. If you don't do the maintenance, it's like I tell people, if you don't change the oil in your car, 2 years from now, you're going to buy a new engine. So if we don't do some of the maintenance things, it then becomes a capital project, but it doesn't necessarily have to. So it's very difficult.
It is.
I feel with Sean, I'm sympathetic with Sean's point of view on town buildings and CM&D on this. Because roads is the same as town buildings. If you chip seal or top coat a road, you might preserve it. If you don't, then you're probably going to grind it down and put 2 full new layers on it in the future. So it's not a one-for-one capital versus operating expense. It's different project work if you don't do maintenance.
And that's exactly it.
I'd ask the same question of Chief Kenny. Are you comfortable with this, the final number in this budget?
The number,
He's going up.
yeah, I mean, I made some reductions and I was able to go in, was able to get a couple personnel into a training program that will allow us to use a quarter cup machine, which saves us about $2,000 a year.
Could you use the microphone so people can hear you? We can hear you here, but there's the public out there. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. People are still watching us at 10.
The final number that is here, yes, I took the, advice of advisory. I really took a hard look at a bunch of the lines to, to see where, I could trim some things. There are some that, the clothing allowance was one that was very difficult. It is, for me, looking at that piece is a foundational piece of PPE. I've had people contaminate or damage their own clothing, and I don't have any money to replace that, and because I don't issue them uniforms. So I was trying to establish, and I think initially, or when I proposed that was something that we were, they were somewhat supportive of, but at the same time, I can't do it all this year. So I cut that back. I was able to, the biggest one was in the OSHA stuff. That was the biggest expense, obviously. I was able to train some personnel. We have access to a NIRAC through our, a regionalization, our NIRAC. We can lease a port account machine. I have 2 people trained. We have the software, so we'll be able to take care of that. That saves us probably more than, about $2,000 annually. That will save us. So that's that was a big one, as well as some other OSHA supplies with, just really whittling away at what the bare minimum we need. I was able to cut the OSHA equipment and PPE down just by hopefully recycling some of the things we have. They're in good shape, and that cut that number down.
Yeah, and that was my,
You did have costs, because this capital project is for the
Yes.
compressor, so you have
Yes.
the operating costs that go hand in hand with now filling the breathing.
Yes.
apparatus.
Yes.
So there was these operating costs associated with the use of the new capital equipment for
Yeah, but I mean, it actually should help us in terms of, the respiratory protection piece was a big deal, in getting the air compressor and the fill station replaced because they weren't compliant. And, that's going to help us. It actually should, lower our cost that I have to use for SCBA maintenance every year.
and as you explained earlier, the reserve fund transfers to help deal with some of those, the tightness in the budget. Any other questions about the?
I assume you took your software out of that.
Yes, David rolled some of that into.
We were going to see what we could negotiate with people's.
Okay, great.
EIS
So
to
hopefully
see.
you may still be able to get,
May be able to make it work by taking a chunk out of some of the money at the end of this fiscal year and coming with
Okay.
that.
great.
And crossing our fingers.
So
And it would-
I'm hoping you can still get something done with that
Yeah.
because I
And
think
it
that's
would-
important, but.
It would come out of that money that we increase the
Oh, okay.
technology line and.
What's the $6,700 expense increase in our selectmen budget?
the technology that came out of the town buildings.
That's a net of like.
That's all that is?
A reduction of like.
It's actually a reduction, yeah.
That's what.
When you consider that 25,000
Oh, yeah,
moved in.
Yeah, we
to your
moved
department.
25,000 from buildings,
Got it, okay.
so we're actually down,
Yeah. If you
our
pull
budget's
that
down
out.
by,
Town buildings is still up.
By a lot.
Actually,
By a lot, that's right. You went through everything.
do they have the individual?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
so
So what do we want to do about the CM&D budget then?
I vote to support it as it is, unfortunately. Because I feel like that's what we have to do this year. That's my motion, to support all these budgets as they're presented.
As the advisory, wait. As the department request, or as the advisory recommendation?
The department request that's the number that we're working with, right?
Yes, the department
Q.
request, yeah, the advisory is accepting that now, and that's what they're
I
presenting.
would vote to support the budgets at column Q.
Yeah.
Column which?
Q.
Q.
But that's the $50,000 increase above. the
Right,
advisory.
and that's what would result in the 2028 tax rate estimated.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the other 50 that Sean was talking about? I thought you said you were down substantially.
No, what I was
From his initial
comparing was
request.
spending, overall spending on roads is down about 150. So although the operating budget's up, we don't have a capital item for roads.
Okay,
We pulled some of it into operating budget there.
Okay.
Other operational expenses that are going up, that may very well end up using that road material.
Okay.
And it's for permanent.
yeah,
I'm not asking for more money, I want you to acknowledge it's a cut in service. In that budget and the buildings budget. We're falling further behind on the buildings. We'll make do with what we have. But we have to save some money for the event that the boiler blows up or something else.
the good thing is we're going to have a brand-new library, so we'll be
Well,
all
the
set.
library dictating some of that, because there's work that is in this year that has to be, if the library ever gets done, we gotta pay for the whole part.
Right. Right.
I think unfortunately, we have to make these hard decisions until we find a way to generate more revenue in this town.
And I'm not against the decision, it's just, it's risky. We could get two-thirds of the way through the year, do the planned projects, and blow the boiler up in the town hall. Can't really say you're not gonna have heat.
The library is way more effective. Sean's making aware of that, it's not just painting the lawn, we have to do the gutters on the police station because they have to drain properly, there's ultimately you have to do the ramp outside that, probably the handicap access ramp now, so it's gonna tie into the pavement, we have to do all that stuff now.
Is restoring the lot next door part of the library project, or we can get stuck doing that too? Restoring the lot next door, it's destroyed. I mean, it's way worse even than it was supposed to be.
Sorry, I know,
Of course, but still,
What is column Q?
Cost of property.
yeah.
Yeah.
City support budgets in column Q.
What's that?
It's supposed to get put back.
Right there.
Yeah.
Oh, that one. Did you see what-
Supposed to.
Anyone else second my motion?
Okay.
You guys want to change any of the budgets?
I'll second the motion.
What?
Further discussion up here?
Under discussion, because it's going to lead to an over $20 tax rate, I'm not going to support it.
Where would you like to make the cuts, Paul?
I'm looking at this advisory committee projections in P, and if we went with P, that gets to 1999.
No, it doesn't. You have to cut an additional $370,000 out of the budget.
And 799.
And that would only
Yes.
represent
Just to get to
$370,799 just to get below $20. This number right here. You gotta find that in all the budgets so you're gonna have to cut
It
the
says
budgets
cuts to
that
level,
much
but it's
further.
really cuts to 1999.
And increase.
Yes.
all prices for revenue, too.
And the thing is, it's an estimate, like,
It is an estimate
There's
based
a
on.
chance that it could be,
Could be.
if
Like a
the revenue
1.18
isn't as bad as we
reduction
think
in
it's gonna be,
property
then
values.
yeah, I
could
mean,
be.
it's an estimate at this point.
It says for the 370, you get to a flat tax rate,
No,
which
it's,
is
it's
1962.
mislabeled, it's
It
1999.
shouldn't say flat,
It
flat.
shouldn't say flat, it's
it's to
1999,
get to this target.
below
rate.
20.
Paul, you're a big taxpayer. If you overpaid for a couple of houses now, you'd be able to keep the market higher and the tax rate would not go down as much. And then you could sell those houses for a higher price.
Would you like me to kick him?
Yeah.
So, I think just to vote against the budget because we think it might be over 20, without specifically saying how you want to cut that budget,
is not fair to the budget maker.
Any other discussion up here?
No, I mean, I agree with Paul, but I'm going to vote with George.
I understand George's point, but my point is that I'm not prepared to support a budget that's going to come out over 20.
Nobody
At
wants
this
to be over
point.
20.
At this point. So what I'm going to do is not support the motion at this point, but I'm going to listen carefully on Saturday and try to figure out a way, and I assume there's going to be a lot of people in advisory who are going to be also working hard to figure out ways to save some money. And if we can get anything that gets us closer to a lower number, I'm going to support on
I don't think that, well, I don't, Paul, we've been working on this for 2 months now. We've hammered people down. We were strongly supportive of his software. It's only $30,000 in total. I don't think it's even remotely possible, and I don't even know that we're planning, advisory's not planning to put a hold on the budget, because we've sat down with
Hammered
every
them so
budget
far.
maker. It's up, the budgets are up very, very, very minusculely, other than the 2% COLA for a salary.
Paul, I could go along with you if you could find specific things to cut. I
Jeff, I have
think
a
just to generally not.
I have a question for
If we could get to
Jeff.
370, yeah.
I have a question for Jeff, which is whether were any departments asked to cut personnel, or was there any exploration of whether all the positions in all the departments were needed?
No, we didn't ask for personnel cuts.
So, I mean, so that was off the table, which is, I mean, you're talking about being over by a substantial amount. You probably wouldn't get there unless you cut a lot of people, but one way businesses take care of deficits is they trim staff.
They do. So basically what you're saying, though, is that, if this is really our point forward revenue model, then we can't afford this level of service. We can't level, in the past, what we've done.
I am saying that.
Dover level funds, we don't level fund, we level services. So we try to do the funding that supports the current service. So we would have to reduce town services further.
No, you have that backwards. We level fund, they level service. So they go up every year because they say level service.
Okay.
And level service means you need to increase.
Yeah.
Right.
But I
If
don't
you're
think
going to stay flat and want to stay flat in a town with no increasing revenue,
Yeah, no, I thought it was,
you have to cut.
I think George is right, but I'm not disagreeing with you, Mike. I think that's true.
I mean, well, we had a crowd of people in here today who did not want to have development in the center of town.
Exactly.
And we're, figuring out lots of different reasons to try to run into that. Now, that may not have been and isn't the perfect development, but I think there's a sentiment among a large group of people that they don't want development in the center of town. If there's not going to be development in town, the tax rate's still going to go up unless we cut services, or we do something else.
or the projects that are under development, including Coolidge Crossing, come online. I mean, Coolidge Crossing is
Housing is the best.
95 units? No,
It's
that's
85.
It's 155 units.
Yes, two
95.
That would actually
Count
make it.
towards the SHI. I mean, the problem is that's 2-3 years off.
Oh, it's been 2 or 3 years off for 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
It has been. I mean,
Yeah,
we started talking about this several years ago. We had
well,
lots
we
of
didn't
meetings.
approve it until December 4th, 2017.
Okay, but
So-
that's still a year and a half ago.
Okay. so
It was
that's
December
what
6th.
But the discussion started a year before that, at least.
Yeah. I don't think anybody expected it to start coming online, helping with taxes
This year.
this year, but, yeah, I haven't seen any holes dug over there either, so.
What straight housing is gonna be, it's, with, increasing the school system, it's around net even with apartments, just so you know. I mean, I wouldn't expect for a windfall. You're gonna need something more commercial to make it for a windfall, just the way it is. To be honest with you, I mean, 370,000 on a budget where we only control 30% of the budget, it's just not gonna happen.
Can we get Jack Savvy to move to Sherborn?
They wouldn't have any place to go. They can't discharge
Want to hear something fun?
their waste, and
they need a
there's no place,
and they
there's
need
no
a
place to
shitload of
go.
water.
Plus, they want the roads to be
And,
paved.
but you know
I mean,
what? Framingham gave them a TIF.
Yeah.
One thing I want to point out on the tax rate is that back in 15, 16, and 17, your tax rate was over $20.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's just the last 2 years that it
And
came down.
And there are
Right,
a
and
lot
it was
of,
hard work to
and
get
there are a
there.
lot of small
Yeah.
towns
Yep.
that are over $20. It's fundamentally a diseconomy of scale.
There are not a lot of small towns that are over $20.
But I will say, though,
I did a Google search a while ago, and I was surprised how many there were. I'll send you the link.
last year, or 2017, with highest average, second highest average taxes paid in the state, combination of the assessment and the values. Second
Yeah, that's
one
it.
went Weston, Sherborn, Lincoln.
That's the fair number to look at.
So the
And
motion
Lincoln has CPA, so
is
does
to
Weston.
approve what's called departmental requests
In our budgets that we control.
in the lower half, the
Yeah, the
departmental
Q.
requests.
Yep.
Item Q for $5,295,804.
Right.
Part of my objection is that it's called departmental requests.
It's just a
It
heading
said
on this.
That this was the netted, ground up number that you said this was. That's a different thing, but you're presenting it as departmental requests. That to me means nothing has been done.
That's not even remotely, most of these departments came back to us at least twice, some 3 times.
Paul, you know that's not true.
I know it's not
Just
true.
because it's a heading on a spreadsheet doesn't mean.
These are their caved-in requests, maybe the right word. In other words, we beat pretty hard on every department.
I'm glad to hear that.
And there's
but
a
that's
couple
not
departments
what
here- You wanna-
this says.
Go back to
That's
the
not what
version
this
1. This
says.
is version 19, Paul. You've had every version emailed to you. If you look at version 1, what their original request was versus this,
Yes.
you'll see great reductions.
I don't doubt that. All I'm saying is, the words that are in the motion tell the public who are listening here today, and to the voters at town meeting, that we're voting on what the departments have asked for, not what has been worked out.
That's not
Find other words for this
Okay, I'll
thing.
change it to a different
Yeah.
motion wording then, because I'm voting on where the departments, the numbers that are represented in column Q, which is the budgets as they've been reduced to as of March 14th.
How about request approved by advisory?
Yeah,
Say again?
or it's not approved by advisory until Saturday.
I'm
Recommended.
sorry, recommended by advisory.
I would say these are the recommended budgets as of now. These are the
Yeah.
adjusted recommended departmental requests.
Much better motion.
Okay. I move that we approve the adjusted departmental requests as presented in version 19 of the budget model in column Q.
I'll second that.
Any other further discussion?
Just,
I think we may want to revisit this at some point if we had a shot at hitting the 370, but based on this, where we are now, I'm going to support this. I hear some sighing over here, Mr. Giammo. Do you have a comment?
no. I'm okay. We're,
I mean, this is no different than any other year. This is the language we've always used, and it's always been us working with the department. I understand your point, but it's what their revised request.
Their revised, their adjusted
It is what
request.
they're willing to request now, but we forced them to go down.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? It is unanimous. Are we ready to?
See you Saturday.
No,
We're not done yet.
No, we're not done yet.
I know.
We have a short executive session. I promise you it will be very short.
Do we have any other reports on anybody?
Yeah, any town, Mr. Williams, Ms. Moores, any reports?
No.
Any reports from members of the select board?
Just that there's a ton of proposed legislation that's going to cause a lot of expenses on the part of every municipality, if enacted. So we're doing the best we can to filter those out.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more coverage of recognition that unfunded mandates are having a huge impact on municipalities, and it's a problem.
Was it a record this year, 6,000 bills filed or something like that?
There's a lot of new reps and new senators who have little or no experience, and they've come up with all kinds of what they call new ideas. But a lot of them, I don't want to be critical of anybody because they're representing their constituents and they creative ideas, but they are very expensive to implement. And some of those expenses are intended to be borne by municipalities. So there's a lot of what's going to be unfunded mandates heading our way unless we can shunt them to one side or get more state funding for them to cover the costs.
But the sustainability coordinator, the grant maker is.
Where's that in the budget?
It's not in the budget. We have to use reserve fund. Right now, their estimate of the cost is they're planning 19 and a half hours. Originally, they came to us for $39,000, $30 for the salary and $9,000 for the benefits, but David said, you can correct me if I misstate, David, that we would do 19 and a half hours, so it wouldn't be a benefited position, so it'd be $30,000 cost.
I thought you were recommending slightly higher.
I didn't hear.
He was saying that the estimate was 30,000 without benefits for a 19 and a half hour position, but I thought, I heard you saying that you thought 33 made more sense.
Yeah.
It was 19 hours times $38 an hour or something.
Yeah, this is just from their presentation. They had a salary of, part-time salary of 30 grand and 9,000 in benefits. They assumed it was a benefit.
Yeah, 37.5,
Yeah.
38,000.
I don't think
But that's, but
That
that's
would be a
for,
reserve fund transfer.
You're the one that started.
but that's a full year salary.
He gave me an answer. Now we got a big dialogue going on. Sorry.
That's a
answered.
full year.
It was good.
Okay, I think any other select board reports?
No.
We're ready to go into executive session. The select board will not return to open session.
You'll have all these.
Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 2, to conduct strategy session in preparation, to discuss strategy with respect to threatened potential litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the town, and the chair so declares library project. I so declare. I need a second and a roll call vote.
Second.
Second. The motion is seconded by Mr. Johnson. Having a second, we will now have a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis.
Aye.
Mr. Yan. Aye. Mr. Giamo.
How long is this going to take?
I'd say 10 minutes and
Aye.
maybe less. Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Jesus. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Having passed by a vote of 5-0,
Thanks, Jeff.
the open session is now closed, and we will not be returning to open session. We are now in executive session.
Sounded like a 4-1 vote to me.